Hello, my name's Gemma, and what I'm about to tell you still doesn't feel real, even after everything's been said and done. My stepmother smiled as she cut my hair, like she'd been waiting years to do it. My stepsister, she yanked off my scarf in front of the whole town, laughed like I was a joke. Then came the whispers, whispers that I was cursed, dangerous, unstable. They locked me in my own room, and while I watched from a window, she stood on that festival stage and read the words I wrote. And the worst part? My own father stood beside them and said, "I have to look out for my daughter." But he wasn't talking about me. Why did my family want me erased so badly? And how far did they go before I finally fought back? I always thought the sound of scissors wasn't supposed to make you flinch, but when they're moving toward your head with purpose, without your permission, they make a sound that slices deeper than hair. That morning, Ashbury was quiet. One of those slow-breathing South Carolina days, with the sky stuck between winter's gray and spring's promise. In our old Victorian house, the walls always held their breath before something cruel happened, and I'd learned to read the silence like scripture. I was halfway through washing the breakfast dishes, still in my faded library staff t-shirt, when Valora walked in behind me. She didn't say hello, she never did. Her perfume hit first, some powdery rose scent that always reminded me of a funeral home. She set her coffee mug down just a little too hard on the counter and said in that syrupy, blade-sharp tone she used for pretending to be civil, "You're not really planning to go on stage looking like that, are you?" I turned, towel in hand, brow already raised. "Looking like what?" She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. "Hair like that, so long, so unkempt. You're not a child anymore, Gemma. People will talk." I didn't answer, because I knew the real reason she was wound so tight. 2 days from now, at the Founders' Day Festival, I was supposed to read one of Mama's favorite poems at the opening ceremony. Reverend Thomas himself had asked. And Valora wanted that spotlight for Sable, her daughter, the golden girl. I dried the last dish, turned my back to her, and kept my jaw tight. She moved closer. I felt the shift in air before I saw the flash of silver. "Just hold still," she said, like she was brushing lint off my shoulder. Then I heard it, the first snip. I whipped around, heart hammering. "What are you—" She grabbed a fistful of my hair and sliced again. "Stop!" I shrieked, stumbling backward. But she wasn't even looking at me. Her eyes were on the strands falling to the tile like dead petals, calm, methodical, like she was weeding a garden. From the corner of my eye, I saw Randall in the doorway, just standing there. One hand in his pocket, the other cradling his morning coffee. Watching. Valora let the scissors dangle by her side and said flatly, "Now you won't steal the spotlight from my daughter." My hands were trembling. My voice stuck behind my tongue. I didn't cry. Not then. I just backed out of the room, fists clenched, the cold tips of my sheared hair brushing against my neck like a bruise. Upstairs, I locked my bedroom door and didn't turn the light on. I stood in front of the mirror, just breathing. The cut wasn't even— it was vicious, ugly. The same hair Mama used to braid for me every night. Gone. I remembered her fingers, gentle and sure, threading through my strands while telling me stories about women who rose, even when the world tried to bury them. Valora had no right to touch what wasn't hers. No right to erase that part of me. I found a soft scarf at the back of my drawer, one Mama had given me when I got my first library job. I tied it tightly around my head, tucked in the ends, and stared at myself again. Different, but not broken. Later that afternoon, I forced myself to walk into town. The Saturday market was alive as ever. Colorful produce stalls, baked goods lined up like soldiers, people smiling over coffee cups and flower arrangements. I walked past them with my head high, even as I felt their eyes dragging across me. At the honey stand, Mrs. Carter greeted me with a tight-lipped smile that didn't match her usual warmth. That's when I knew. The news had already traveled. Or maybe it was just the scarf. Maybe they sensed weakness. People in Ashbury could smell shame the way bloodhounds smell fear. That's when I saw her, Sable. She was radiant as always, in her pastel dress and flawless hair, fluttering around like she owned the whole sidewalk. She spotted me before I could duck away. "Jemmy!" she called out sweetly, her voice loud enough for half the market to hear. I turned, already bracing. She stepped forward, smile locked in place. "Oh, that scarf is cute. Mind if I see what's underneath?" Before I could answer, before I could even move, she yanked. It came off in one quick jerk, and so did my breath. Gasps, then the hush, then the sound of someone snickering behind a tomato crate. I stood frozen. The wind bit at my exposed neck. My chopped hair stuck out in jagged layers, uneven and raw. I looked like I'd been through a storm. Sable tilted her head, mock surprise painted across her face. "Oh, I thought you were just wearing it for style." I didn't say a word. Didn't run, didn't flinch. I reached down, picked up the scarf with steady fingers, and tied it back on without breaking eye contact. Then I walked away, not fast, not slow, just steady. People parted to let me through. Some pretended to look at other things. Others didn't even bother to hide their smirks. I made it all the way home without shedding a tear, but once I was inside, once I closed the front door and leaned against it, my knees went soft. I let myself sit on the hardwood floor for a few minutes. Let the silence settle. They weren't just trying to embarrass me. They were trying to erase me. I went upstairs and opened my mother's old notebook. Inside was the poem I was supposed to read at the festival, The Quiet Route. It was about growth in darkness, about beauty no one saw until it broke the ground. I copied one line onto a scrap of paper and pinned it to my mirror. They buried me, but they didn't know I was a seed. If they thought this would break me, they were wrong. I didn't sleep much that night. The weight of what happened at the market clung to me like smoke in my clothes, impossible to shake off. I thought if I could just make it through Sunday, things would settle. That by Monday, people would find something else to whisper about. I was wrong. By sunrise, the first whispers had turned into full sentences, and by the time I left the house for work, the town already had a new story. One with me at the center, wrapped in shadows I hadn't earned. As I walked along Main Street toward the library, I could feel it. Something had shifted. The usual greetings were there, technically, but they were colder, clipped at the edges. No small talk. No, "How's your dad?" from Mrs. Evers. Just a series of tight nods and glances that didn't last longer than they had to. I passed Keller's bakery and caught a glimpse of Sable standing just outside with Mrs. Keller herself. They leaned in close like co-conspirators, speaking in tones too low for me to catch, but not so low that I couldn't feel the weight of it. Sable caught my eye and gave me a smile. One of those fake, slow ones that made you feel like you'd walked into a trap and only realized too late. When I finally reached the library, the space felt off. Carla, one of our regulars, lingered longer than usual at the checkout desk, her hands twitchy, her voice uneven. "I was just wondering," she said, not meeting my gaze. "Were you up by the old oak tree Thursday night? Someone said they saw you doing something." I blinked. "Doing what?" Carla hesitated. "Muttering, like chanting, that kind of thing." I laughed, short, flat. "No, I wasn't. And even if I had been, I promise I wasn't calling down the plague." She laughed too, but hers was nervous, as if she suddenly realized she shouldn't be standing so close to me. The conversation didn't last long. She left with her book tucked close like a shield, and I was left staring at the stamp on the inside cover, wondering when common sense became a luxury in Ashbury. I spent most of the day going through my normal routine, reshelving, organizing the new arrivals, helping a few students with their assignments. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that people were watching me through a different lens, like everything I said or did had to be run through some sinister filter before they could understand it. That night, just as I was settling into a quiet dinner alone, my phone buzzed. It was Thalia. Her message was short. "Check the community page. Now." I opened the Facebook group, Ashbury Connect, and there it was. A post from an anonymous account, a photo of one of my sketchbook pages. The symbols, delicate, looping patterns I'd drawn for a local history project on early Appalachian folklore, looked strange out of context. Paired with the caption, they looked dangerous. What is this? Is someone bringing bad luck to Ashbury? My chest tightened. I scrolled through the comments. Isn't that the librarian girl? I heard she was caught talking to herself near the churchyard. This is why our crops are failing. I always knew she was strange. There were a few voices defending me, people reminding others that Ashbury had always dealt with seasonal blight, that folklore wasn't witchcraft, but they were buried under layers of suspicion and fear. The image had come from my private sketchbook, a book I kept in my desk drawer, one that only one other person had ever touched. Sable. A few weeks ago, she had asked to borrow it, to help her with a floral design she was sketching for Valora's shop window. I hadn't thought twice about it. She returned it with a smile and a compliment. "You've got talent," she'd said. I should have known better. I stormed downstairs, sketchbook in hand. Randall sat in his recliner, flipping through channels with the same disinterest he always wore like a second skin. "Did you see the post?" I asked. He didn't look up. "I don't get involved in Facebook drama." "She stole from me," I said. Sable took my sketchbook and twisted it into something ugly. "People are accusing me of witchcraft, for God's sake." Valora entered from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. "If people think you've brought trouble here," she said, "maybe it's for a reason." I turned to her, fury vibrating just beneath the surface of my voice. "What's that supposed to mean?" She shrugged, unbothered. "You keep to yourself. You don't smile much. You wear those scarves. People talk." Randall said nothing. He never did. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. Back in my room, I sat at my desk, staring at the spot where my sketchbook usually lived. The space felt hollow now, like something sacred had been violated. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't petty jealousy. This was a plan, coordinated, deliberate, cruel. I pulled out a notepad and scribbled 2 words in capital letters. Prove it. I didn't know how just yet, but I wasn't going to let them get away with this. It was barely light outside when I walked up the steps of Ashbury First Baptist Church. The cold bit at my fingers, but I wasn't sure if it was the temperature or what I suspected was waiting for me inside. The parking lot still held the dewy stillness of early morning, but there were voices echoing from the foyer. I knew I should have waited until later in the day, when fewer people were around, but something in my chest told me to go now. Face it head on. Inside, the smell of floor polish and paper bulletins hit me like it always did. Familiar, almost comforting. I nodded politely to Mrs. Dawson, who was arranging coffee cups in the fellowship corner, and walked straight to the corkboard where they pinned the weekly announcements. The flyer was there. Founders Day Festival, opening ceremony, reading. Sable Griggs. Not my name. Hers. Same time, same place. Same poem I had practiced since February. My breath caught, but I didn't let it sit too long. I scanned the rest of the list. My name wasn't anywhere. Not on the volunteer schedule, not on the sign-up sheet for table setup, not even on the baker's needed notice. They hadn't just replaced me, they had scrubbed me clean off the program like I was never part of it to begin with. As I stood there, motionless, I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned to find Mr. Kavanaugh, an elder, someone I'd known since I was a child, glancing at the bulletin with an awkward tilt of his head. "Maybe it's for the best, Gemma," he muttered, eyes not quite meeting mine. "Things are tense enough." I wanted to ask him what that meant exactly. Tense for who? But instead I just nodded slightly, as if that made sense, and walked out before my face gave me away. By the time I got to Main Street, the stores had opened, and the town was already buzzing with festival preparation. Banners stretched from one side of the street to the other. Children were painting wooden signs. The bakery had put up frosted cookies in the shape of Ashbury's bell tower. I tried to walk past it all, pretend I wasn't unraveling. But then I saw the poster taped to the florist's window. Valora's window. It was a glossy photo of Sable, smiling in a soft yellow dress, holding a leather-bound poetry book I recognized as mine. The caption read, "Join Ashbury's own Sable Griggs as she opens this year's Founders' Day with a heartfelt reading honoring our town's spirit." My knees almost buckled. I stepped back, head spinning, watching as Valora appeared behind the glass, arranging tulips. She looked up, saw me, and gave the smallest nod, as if acknowledging an agreed-upon outcome. It was never about the poem. It was about taking my place, piece by piece. I walked without a destination for a while, just up and down side streets, trying to breathe through the ache in my chest. Eventually, my feet carried me to Ioni's house, the one person left in this town who still called me dear without bitterness in her voice. She opened the door with a soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You look tired," she said gently, motioning me inside. I sat down at her kitchen table while she poured tea, chamomile same as always, and set out a dish of ginger snaps she'd probably baked the night before. We chatted, or tried to. I asked about her garden. She asked about my hours at the library. But every time I brought up the festival, or even mentioned the church, her expression would falter. She'd change the subject, or refill my cup. Finally, I said it plainly. "Did Valora come see you?" Her silence was answer enough. When she did speak, her voice was so quiet I barely caught it. "She stopped by last night." I set my cup down. "And?" "She didn't threaten me. Not directly." Ioni's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. "But she mentioned old stories, things from my nursing days, accusations that were never true but never quite went away either." I stared at her. "She blackmailed you." "She gave me a choice," Ione said, eyes glistening. "She said it would be better for everyone if I kept some distance for a while." My throat tightened. "And you agreed?" Her lips pressed into a line. "I'm sorry, Gemma. I truly am. But I can't afford to lose what little I have left in this town." I stood, not out of anger, but to keep from crying in front of her. Ione didn't look away. "I hope you understand," she whispered. I did. I didn't like it. But I understood. People in this town weren't brave. They were self-preserving. Valora didn't need to shout to control them, just whisper in the right ears. I left her house around midday. The sun was out now, but it didn't warm me much. On the way home, I passed familiar faces. Some looked through me. Others offered thin, artificial smiles, the kind people give to strangers who make them uncomfortable. When I walked past the florists again, Valora was standing outside with a clipboard, organizing deliveries for the festival. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and a floral print apron. She laughed at something one of the teens said. As I passed, she didn't acknowledge me. She didn't have to. She had already erased me. I got home, made myself a sandwich I didn't finish, and went upstairs. My room was the only place in the house that still felt like mine. Barely. That night, I sat at the window, lights dimmed, watching strings of bulbs being tested across the festival grounds in the park down the road. People were already setting up tents, checking audio equipment. I watched them walk back and forth like they were building a celebration on top of my body. They'd stripped me of my voice, my space, my connections, and now they were pretending I never existed at all. But if Valora thought this was done, if she thought I'd slink away quietly, she was wrong. "They think they can erase me," I whispered to the dark outside. "Let's see how that goes." Monday morning rolled in under a veil of quiet dread. It should have felt like any other week in Ashbury. Kids heading off to school with their lunchboxes swinging, folks lining up for coffee at Donna's Diner, a few early risers already prepping booths for the upcoming Founders' Day festival. But beneath it all, I sensed the shift, the kind you don't see but feel in your bones. My name had been on too many lips for too many days, and I knew something was coming. I was at the community center helping set up for the craft fair. I'd signed up months ago, before everything started spiraling. It was one of the few responsibilities they hadn't formally kicked me off of. Yet, I figured if I kept my head down and focused on the task, I might remind people I still belonged here, that I wasn't some ghost wandering the streets. I was unpacking yarn bundles at the far end of the hall when I heard my name spoken loud enough to crack through the hum of conversation. Gemma! I turned. Mrs. Fuller was storming toward me, her face flushed, one hand clutching her purse like a weapon. Her other arm held tightly onto her son's shoulder. Eli, maybe 8 or 9, looking pale and confused. "You touched my boy at church yesterday, didn't you?" she demanded. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "Someone saw you patting his head after the service, and now he's running a fever and can't hold down his breakfast." I looked at Eli, who didn't meet my eyes, just stared down at the floor. "I handed him a bulletin," I said evenly. "That's all." "Then why would someone say they saw you whispering something over him?" "Something strange?" I felt a chill at the back of my neck. "I didn't whisper anything. I said, 'Have a good week,' same as I do with all the kids." Her voice rose. "You think this is funny? You think playing innocent will change what's happening in this town?" Other heads were turning now. Crafters, vendors, even Pastor Walker, who'd just arrived and was still sipping from his travel mug. They weren't approaching, but they were watching. Mrs. Fuller pointed at me. "This is what happens when you let evil walk around unchecked. My boy's sick because you brought something into that church." "That's enough," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're scared, and I get it, but pointing fingers without proof." "She's right." That voice, soft, sugary, and venom-laced, cut through the crowd like a blade. Sable stepped forward from the far side of the room, arms crossed, phone in hand, like she'd been filming or getting ready to. "Gemma's been drawing strange things. Everyone's seen it. And she was near the boy. Coincidence?" People started murmuring. "She was at the tree before the crops went bad." "She's always off in her own world." "Didn't she have some weird journal or something?" I stood frozen, watching the whispers turn into a swarm. And then, just when I thought it couldn't sting worse, Randall walked through the door. He paused when he saw the scene, me standing alone in the middle of an increasingly hostile circle. He didn't look surprised. He never looked surprised anymore. Someone asked him, "Is this your daughter?" He hesitated. For the smallest moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd stand up for me. But then he said, "I don't know what she's been up to, but let me be clear. I'm not involved in any of this." It hit me harder than I expected. Not the words exactly, but the way he said them. As if he were stepping back from a stranger at a crime scene, my own father. The crowd didn't explode. They didn't need to. The damage was already done. His silence before was bad enough. But this? This was erasure wrapped in false neutrality. Behind him, Valora stood near the doorway, arms folded, face calm as stone. And next to her, of course, Sable raised her phone and hit record. I caught just enough of the screen to see it was already live. I looked back at Randall, searching for any sign of regret. There was none. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. Instead, I walked. Right past Mrs. Fuller, past the pastor, past the dozens of eyes following me like I was something crawling across the floor. As I stepped outside into the warm morning air, I felt like I was watching my life collapse from the outside. The sky was clear, birds chirped, the festival banners fluttered with cheer, and inside, a room full of people had just decided I wasn't one of them anymore. I walked the long way home, through Maple Street and past the park. It gave me time to think, to feel, and to plan. By the time I reached my front steps, my body felt heavy, but my mind was strangely sharp. I opened the door, dropped my bag, and stood there for a minute, looking around the living room. The floral couch Valora picked out, the wooden frames Randall insisted on keeping, the fake houseplants Sable used for her video backgrounds. None of it felt like home. None of it ever did. I made myself a cup of tea, didn't drink it. I sat in my room, didn't move for a while. My hands clenched and unclenched without my noticing. And then, finally, I heard myself think something I hadn't allowed before. If they've already painted me as the villain, maybe it's time I stop acting like the saint. After that Monday at the community center, I didn't speak to anyone in the house for 2 full days. Not Valora, not Sable, and not Randall. I moved like a ghost, in and out of rooms, keeping my back straight, my eyes forward. They didn't seem to mind. Valora whistled when she cooked. Sable filmed one of her day-in-the-life videos on the porch, pretending she was the perfect small-town daughter. And Randall, he did what he did best. He sat in his chair, nodded along with the news, and said nothing. Wednesday night arrived like an unwanted letter in the mail, heavy and final. I was in my room, the one place in that house still untouched by their hands. A single lamp lit the corner of my desk, casting a soft glow on the objects that still connected me to something pure. There weren't many left. On my lap was my mother's scarf. Cream-colored with delicate green stitching along the edges, it smelled faintly of lavender, even after all these years. It was the only thing I had from her that hadn't been boxed away or thrown out. I held it like it might vanish if I blinked too long. I could still picture the morning she gave it to me. 5th grade, first day back after summer break. She'd wrapped it around my shoulders as I sulked about my new haircut. "This will keep you warm and safe," she'd said, "and remind you that you're always more than what people see." I pressed it to my chest and let the memory sit there for a minute longer, like holding on to the last note of a song you don't want to end. That was when I smelled the smoke. Not the kind from dinner gone wrong or a candle left too long. No, this was sharp, biting, and wrong. I stood up, folded the scarf carefully, and walked to the hallway. The scent grew stronger as I passed Randall's closed door and stepped onto the back porch. Outside, the night was cool but still. I saw the flicker before I saw her. Valora stood by the fire pit with her arms crossed, staring into the flames like they had something important to say. I stepped closer, the porch wood creaking beneath me. Then I saw it, the corner of cream-colored fabric in her hand, green thread curling up at the edges from heat. "Don't," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut air. She turned slowly. Her expression didn't shift, not guilt, not surprise. "You're up," she said plainly, and with a final flick of her wrist, she dropped the scarf into the fire. I ran forward, almost slipping on the dewy grass, and watched it curl and blacken in the flames. My hands shook, not with panic, with fury. "What is wrong with you?" I choked out. Valora didn't answer right away. She picked up the fire poker and nudged the fabric deeper into the embers like it was just a scrap of paper that didn't matter. "You need to stop clinging to the past," she finally said. "This is my house now. My family." I stared at her. Not the way you stare at a person. The way you look at something decaying and still pretending it's alive. "I should have burned it a long time ago," she added. "That woman, your mother, she left behind more mess than memories." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Behind me, I heard the door open. Randall stepped out, rubbing the back of his neck like the whole thing was just an unfortunate inconvenience. "She burned Mom's scarf," I said to him. My voice cracked. "She took the one thing I had left." He looked at the fire, then at me, then at her, and he sighed. "Gemma, I have to look out for my daughter." I blinked. "What?" He didn't say it again. He didn't need to. In that moment, I saw it clearly. He didn't see me as his daughter anymore. Maybe he hadn't for years. Sable was easier, louder. She smiled more. She didn't ask for space to grieve. Didn't flinch when Valora took over every inch of the house that used to hold my mother's laughter. I looked between them, my stepmother who destroyed what wasn't hers, and the man who let her. "You always said this was my home," I said quietly. "That no matter what, it would be mine." Randall swallowed hard. "Things change." A slow breath left my chest, not from exhaustion, but clarity. I took one step forward, enough for the firelight to catch my face. "If either of you try to erase me again," I said, voice low and steady, "you'll regret it." Valora raised an eyebrow like she'd heard a joke she didn't quite get. Randall looked at his feet, and I turned and walked away, back into the house, up the stairs, into my room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I sat down at my desk and stared at the burned gap on my bookshelf where the scarf used to rest. I opened my drawer, pulled out a notebook, and wrote one sentence across the top of a fresh page. "They've taken enough." And I underlined it twice. I woke to golden stripes of sunlight cutting through the blinds, painting bars across the walls like I was somewhere between a bedroom and a cell. Somewhere outside, I heard the distant slam of a car door. For a moment, I thought I'd overslept. My alarm hadn't gone off. I rubbed my temples, blinking off the last threads of sleep as I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My body still ached from restless tossing. A dull unease settled over my chest. I padded across the room and reached for the doorknob, intending to head to the bathroom, maybe grab some water, normal things that shouldn't require second thoughts. The knob didn't turn. I blinked, tightened my hand, and twisted again. Harder. Still nothing. The door wasn't stuck. It was locked, from the outside. My heart gave a panicked flutter. I knocked once, then twice. Hello? My voice was cautious, unsure, still hoping this was some kind of mistake. Silence. I pressed my ear to the wood, breath shallow. Below, I could hear the muffled shuffle of movement, laughter, Sable's sugary, performative laugh, followed by Valora's clipped voice issuing instructions like she was orchestrating a campaign. Zippers, shuffling, the familiar thunk of the front door closing. Then, tires rolling across gravel. Then, nothing. I ran to the window and yanked open the blinds just in time to see the family car pulling out of the driveway. In the back seat, poised and perfect, sat Sable. Her hair had been curled into soft waves. Her lips were glossed. She wore the pale blue dress I had ironed and laid out the night before. My dress. The one I planned to wear on stage today. And in her lap, she held a stack of white paper. My speech. They didn't even bother pretending anymore. I stood motionless, the truth hitting me, not like a slap, but like a slow flood, each detail sinking in deeper. Today was the Ashbury Heritage Festival, the culmination of months of planning, community meetings, drafts, and rewrites. I'd poured myself into that speech. Each word was meant to be mine, a reflection of my voice, my heart, my roots in this town. And now, they were going without me, wearing my clothes, speaking my words, stealing my place. My breath came shallow, and my hands trembled. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet and surgical, precise, like they'd planned this, like locking me in was just another part of the script. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed and reached for my phone on the desk. It was still charging. I unlocked it and opened the Ashbury Connect Facebook page, the town's lifeline for events and live updates. The live stream had already started. The stage was everything I had helped design. Soft yellow bunting, wild sunflowers in mason jars, and wooden chairs arranged under strings of white lights swaying in the breeze. It was the perfect vision of Southern charm, the kind that made people nostalgic for a version of history they never lived. And there, in the center, stood Sable, grinning. Her posture relaxed, confident. She adjusted the microphone with the ease of someone born into entitlement. And then she spoke. The words were mine, word for word. She even mimicked my pauses, my inflections. I could almost hear where I'd scribbled out alternatives in my journal, crafting every sentence like a melody. The audience nodded along. Some clapped. The pastor shook her hand with pride. Someone handed her a bouquet, and the mayor leaned in for a photo. And I, locked in my bedroom, sat holding a phone, invisible. I set the phone down gently, like if I moved too fast, the truth would shatter. I stood in the middle of the room, breathing slow and shallow, trying to stop the hot prickle at the back of my eyes. I had two choices. I could sit and cry, or I could get out. I crossed to the closet and dropped to my knees. Months ago, I had stored a small toolkit there after replacing a warped window hinge. I didn't think I'd need it again, but now, it felt like an anchor. I rummaged past storage boxes and found the red metal case. My fingers were clumsy, unsteady, but I pried it open and pulled out a flathead screwdriver. I went to work on the door. The screws were stubborn. My shoulders ached from the angle. I had to pause a few times to catch my breath, to stretch my wrist, to steady my hands. But I didn't give up. I didn't yell for help. I didn't cry. I worked. And when the last screw clinked to the floor and the door eased open, I felt something rise inside me. Not rage, not even relief. Power. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to be rescued. I had solved it myself. The hallway beyond was silent, echoing, hollow. I walked slowly down the stairs, letting my feet land with quiet deliberation. I took in the stillness. The smell of Valora's citrus cleaner still lingered in the air. The pristine living room was untouched, centerpiece precisely aligned, coasters stacked, no sign of the chaos they'd left behind. Sable's tote bag sat on the couch like an afterthought. Randall's favorite mug, half full of coffee, sat on the side table, cooling without an owner. I could have stormed to the festival. I could have marched up to the stage and told everyone the truth. I had every right to, but I didn't. Instead, I walked back to my desk, sat down, took a slow breath, and pulled out a fresh notebook. I opened it to the first page, and in bold, steady letters, I wrote, "They just turned this into a fight they can't win." I underlined it. Twice. This wasn't just about a stolen speech or a locked door. This was about something deeper, the slow, deliberate erasure of a person's voice, the kind of cruelty that hides behind manners and smiles and lace curtains. I had spent too long excusing it, too long trying to make peace, too long hoping that being quiet, being kind, being cooperative would earn me a seat at the table. But today, they slammed the door behind them and locked it. So now I would do what they never expected. I would tell the truth, piece by piece, date by date. I began writing. Every slight, every time my contributions were passed off, every meeting where my ideas were echoed louder by someone else's voice. I wrote down the dress, the speech, the keys I'd once had to the office that mysteriously stopped working. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing this because I deserved to exist in full view. They wanted me silent. They wanted me erased. They had no idea who they were dealing with. By Monday morning, I'd already started building my case. I didn't make a speech. I didn't call anyone out. I did what my mother used to do when the world got too loud, pulled inward and got to work. Quietly, precisely. Thalia and I met in the back corner of the Ashbury Public Library, where the Wi-Fi was strongest and the windows faced the alley, not the street. Less chance of someone peeking in or accidentally listening too close. She brought her laptop, I brought a box of old paperwork I'd kept tucked away in a trunk, and together we started organizing the mess into something sharp. "Your name is still listed on the original property transfer," Talia said, eyes skimming through the scanned deed. "It doesn't say full ownership, but your mother's signature shows clear intent to preserve your stake." I nodded, jotting notes as she spoke. That mattered, not just emotionally, but legally. We backed up screenshots of the original email I'd sent to Sable with my speech draft, proof of authorship. I highlighted witness statements from two of my regulars at the library who remembered me reading those exact lines out loud during practice. Everything had to be verifiable. I wasn't going to hand Valora or Sable any room to say I was making things up or being emotional, like they always claimed when they ran out of excuses. By the time the lunch hour passed, we'd filled a USB drive and most of a notebook. It was the closest thing I'd felt to control in weeks. That night, I stayed up late formatting everything, labeling files, setting folders in order. It felt a little ridiculous at times, like I was preparing for trial when all I wanted was my life back. But I knew better now. In Ashbury, perception was power, and for too long, Valora had controlled both. Then came the pushback. It started with a Facebook post, simple, short, and dripping with condescension. Some of us are trying to stay positive despite the negativity others are spreading. Mental health is serious, y'all. Pray for those struggling to see themselves clearly. Signed, Valora Griggs. Not directly naming me, of course. That would have required honesty. But everyone knew who she meant. The comments came fast. "You're so strong, Valora. Some people just can't handle seeing others succeed. Been praying for peace in your household." Sable chimed in an hour later with a post of her own, a close-up of her holding a candle and the words, "Lifting someone I love through prayer, not naming names, just trusting God." I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly gave myself a headache. But it worked. That's what stung most. The message wasn't just reaching their friends. It was bleeding into the church group chats, the PTA circles, the silent spaces where people whispered and rarely checked facts. I knew I couldn't outpost them, so I stuck to my plan. Tuesday afternoon, I overheard Randall on the phone in the kitchen. I wasn't eavesdropping. He wasn't exactly being quiet. Yeah, he was saying. She's going through something, I think. Valora wouldn't post something like that without a reason. I stood in the hallway, out of sight but close enough to feel the weight of every word. She's been distant, upset about things that happened years ago. It's hard to reason with someone who won't let go. It took everything in me not to walk in there and scream, but I didn't. I waited until he hung up, then went outside to sit on the steps and let the cool air pull the heat from my skin. I didn't cry. I was done crying over Randall, over the man who used to tuck my scarf into my coat when I was a little girl, over the man who, apparently, decided I was too much work to defend. By Wednesday, the smear campaign had picked up steam. Someone anonymously submitted a story to the town newsletter, talking about a concerning figure in the community who had been caught trespassing, drawing occult symbols, and displaying increasingly erratic behavior. There was no name attached, just sources say, but the quotes sounded awfully familiar. Thalia sent me a photo of the print copy, circled in red ink. Want me to write something back? She texted. No, I replied. Let them talk. I'm almost ready. We spent the next few days tightening the record. I called in a favor from a local librarian who remembered when Valora first moved into town and how she never once volunteered for a community event until my mother passed. Thalia found a blurry photo of a whiteboard I'd used for planning my reading draft, dated a week before Sable ever asked to help. We pieced it all together like a puzzle, and when it was done, I looked at it and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, solid. That night, I sat at my desk in the dark, the glow of my screen casting light over the USB drive in front of me. They wanted to play in public, I whispered. Let's see how they handle the truth in public. The invitation to speak at the town council came in the most unexpected way, through a polite email from the clerk's office, buried between junk mail and utility reminders. It simply said, Agenda addition approved. You've been allotted 5 minutes for property clarification. Please bring documentation. 5 minutes. After months of being erased, misquoted, locked out, and lied about, I was being given 5 minutes to set everything straight. That would have felt like an insult once, but not now. I printed everything, organized files, created duplicates, and tucked the USB drive into my purse like it was holding the weight of justice itself. Thalia double-checked every folder, every page. Arthur Linton, my mother's old attorney, confirmed he'd meet me there at 6:15 sharp. The Ashbury Town Hall was buzzing when I arrived that evening. Parking was tighter than usual. People lingered outside in clusters, sipping sweet tea, leaning on pickup trucks, speculating about budgets and festival bills. The Founders' Day wrap-up meeting was always crowded, but the air tonight held a different kind of tension, like something was about to break loose, and no one knew quite what. I walked up the steps, head high, every pair of eyes tracking me like I was a stranger in my own town. I spotted Valora and Sable inside, sitting confidently near the front. Randall was with them, slouched in his usual way, looking bored, like he had been dragged along. I took my seat in the back, near the windows, 2 rows behind the podium. The first 20 minutes dragged. Committee reports, funding disputes, some back and forth about pothole repairs on Chapel Street. I barely heard a word. My hands stayed folded, my pulse a steady throb in my ears. Then the clerk called my name. Miss Gemma Monroe, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours. I stood, papers in hand. The room quieted fast. Even Valora stopped tapping her pen. I'm here to speak about the Monroe property, I said clearly. Specifically, the rightful ownership. Before anyone could interrupt, the rear doors creaked open. Arthur Linton entered, dressed in his usual blazer, holding a leather briefcase that looked older than I was. He nodded at me, then stepped forward and handed a thick folder to the council clerk. This pertains to the original will and deed of transfer, Arthur announced. Filed in 1999, signed by Margaret Monroe, prior to her marriage to Randall Pike. You could hear the oxygen leave the room. Arthur continued without missing a beat. The will names her daughter, Gemma Monroe, as the sole inheritor of the property located at 48 Mill Creek Road. No amendments were ever filed. No contestation was made at the time of death. This document was legally binding then and remains so now. Valora sat up straighter. Sable blinked. Randall leaned forward like maybe, for once, he realized something wasn't going to go his way. The council members flipped through the pages, murmuring. The clerk scanned and projected the deed onto the overhead screen. There it was, my mother's handwriting, clear and looped, my name spelled out in full. I've also filed for immediate legal enforcement, Arthur said, pulling out another document. Per court order, eviction notices have been issued to Mrs. Valora Griggs, Miss Sable Griggs, and Mr. Randall Pike. They have 72 hours to vacate the premises. That was it. Clean, direct, legal. Valora opened her mouth, but the council chair shut it for her. This isn't a debate, ma'am. The order stands. Sable looked like she wanted to vanish. Randall turned red. Not angry red, but something worse. Embarrassed. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just stood a little taller. I turned to them, calm and steady, and said, You spent months trying to erase me from my own life. It's over. And with that, I picked up my purse, nodded to Arthur, and walked out of the room. I didn't wait for reactions. I didn't need them. Outside, the air was crisp and open. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe without feeling like I owed anyone an apology. I walked slowly toward my car, letting the weight of it settle. Not revenge, not even justice, just restoration. The past few months had been a storm, but in that moment, with my mother's name legally tethered back to mine, I felt something anchor inside me again. By the end of the week, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The front door clicked shut behind me one final time that week, and for the first time in years, no one was coming through it after me. No muffled footsteps upstairs. No passive-aggressive questions from the kitchen. No manufactured laughter echoing down the hallway. Just me. And silence. The house was mine now. Legally. Fully. Every inch of hardwood, every creaky stair, every spot where dust had settled untouched for too long. But as I stood in the living room that Friday afternoon, with nothing left of them except a faint trace of Valora's perfume lingering in the curtains, the stillness wrapped around me like something I didn't quite trust yet. I walked slowly from room to room, letting my fingers graze the walls like I was meeting them for the first time. The dining table, once host to dinners where Randall barely looked at me, sat clean and quiet. Sable's makeup mirror had been stripped from the upstairs bathroom. Valora's framed photos were gone, the nails they hung on still embedded in the walls like ghosts who hadn't gotten the message to leave. I paused in the doorway of what used to be their bedroom. Empty. Just sunlight cutting across the floor where her jewelry box once sat. I wasn't smiling. Not exactly. But my jaw wasn't clenched either. That evening, I stopped by the library to check the returns. Routine. Grounding. On the way out, two regulars, Mrs. Vaughn and Pete Langford, were whispering near the mystery section. When they saw me, they stiffened a bit, but Mrs. Vaughn leaned in and said, Well, I guess she finally got what was coming. Pete nodded. Did you hear the flower shop shut down? Whole communities turned cold on her. I didn't say much, just offered a polite smile and kept walking, but inside, I filed it away. Not with glee, not as some triumph to save her, just confirmation. Valora had spent years building a name on half-truths and charm. But the foundation cracked fast once people saw through it. Later that weekend, Thalia texted me a screenshot. Sable's influencer account had been flagged for plagiarism after someone submitted my original speech to the hosting platform. Sponsorships gone. Follower count plummeting. Her brand unraveling in real time. Randall, I heard through Ione, had moved into a rental on the far end of town. One of those one-bedroom apartments above a hardware store. Word was, he hadn't shown up for breakfast at the diner all week. Folks stopped sitting with him anyway. The fallout happened fast, but none of it brought back what they took. Monday morning, Ione came by. She held a small potted fern in her arms and wore that look I'd always associated with good intentions wrapped in quiet regret. I should have done more, she said as I opened the door. You kept my mother's will safe, I told her, stepping aside to let her in. That was enough. We sat on the porch with tea, the breeze just light enough to rustle the old wind chimes. She didn't talk much, neither did I. Some silences aren't heavy, they're healing. And I'd missed that kind. As dusk settled, she squeezed my hand gently and said, "You did right, Gemma. Your mama would be proud." That night, I walked back inside alone and went straight to the study. Where the scarf used to be, I had placed a framed photograph of me and Mom from my high school graduation. She looked proud, hands on my shoulders, chin tilted like she knew I'd make it through something bigger than either of us could have imagined back then. I opened my journal and wrote, "Winning doesn't erase what they took, but it stops them from taking more." I sat there for a long time, staring at those words. They weren't poetic, they didn't need to be, they were true. I made a decision right then. This house wouldn't just be a victory monument or a museum to grief. It would be a haven, a place for anyone who ever felt unseen, unheard, unwanted. I wasn't the only one in this town who'd been quietly erased. I just happened to fight louder. Before I went to bed, I walked through the house one more time. Not because I was checking for them, but because it was mine now. I turned off the hallway lights, one by one, and stood in the kitchen doorway with my hand resting on the old oak trim. "This is mine now," I whispered, and for the first time in months, the house didn't push back. I locked the front door, set the alarm, and climbed the stairs with no fear of what I might hear or who I might bump into. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't arrive with trumpets or fireworks. It came like a soft exhale, in a house finally still. Because in Ashbury, nothing stays quiet forever. Sometimes, the people who try the hardest to silence you are the ones most afraid of what your truth will reveal. This story isn't just about betrayal or revenge, it's about reclaiming your voice when everyone around you tries to take it. What would you do if your own family turned against you? Would you stay silent or fight back? Let me know in the comments, and if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw, and unforgettable stories like this one. I'm Sarah, and this is the story of how my family tried to take everything from me. On Christmas Eve, my sister Callie discovered I had $15 million, and within minutes, my entire family turned on me. They called me selfish, ungrateful, a terrible daughter for not handing over my hard-earned money. But that was just the beginning. The lies started stacking up. The manipulation, the betrayal, it ran deeper than I ever imagined. They forged my signature, stole from my accounts, even tried to have me declared mentally unfit just to take control of what I built. And worst of all, they never saw anything wrong with it. I thought I was prepared for their greed, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey filled the air as I stepped into my parents' house. Christmas Eve in Chicago had always been the same. Twinkling lights, over-decorated halls, and forced smiles masking the undercurrent of tension that simmered beneath the surface. I adjusted my coat, shaking off the biting winter cold as I walked toward the living room. The place was warm, cozy, yet suffocating in a way I couldn't quite describe. My mother, Eleanor, had gone all out this year. Gold-trimmed napkins, a lavishly set dining table, and a ridiculously oversized Christmas tree that almost reached the ceiling. Callie, my younger sister, was already basking in the attention as I entered. Dressed in a designer red dress, she leaned dramatically against the fireplace, her laughter echoing through the room. "Oh my God, you wouldn't believe the deal I got on this bag," she gushed, holding up her newest luxury purchase. "It was on sale for $1,800. Can you believe that steal?" I forced a polite smile. Same old Callie, always flaunting, always needing the spotlight. "Hey, Sarah, glad you could make it," my father, Gregory, said, without looking up from his bourbon. "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The night went as expected. Callie dominated the conversation. Mother fussed over her, and Dad sat back, sipping his drink, offering occasional nods of approval. I had long learned to blend into the background, but tonight there was something different. Callie's eyes kept darting toward my purse, her gaze lingering on my laptop bag. There was an unsettling eagerness in her expression, like a predator waiting for the right moment to pounce. I should have known. The disaster unfolded while I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of wine. A shriek rang through the house, high-pitched and theatrical. "Oh my God!" Callie's voice cut through the chatter, stopping every conversation dead in its tracks. I froze, dread curling in my stomach like a living thing. $15 million! Are you freaking kidding me? Silence fell. I stepped into the living room, my pulse hammering. All eyes were on Callie, who stood in the center of the room, clutching my laptop in her manicured hands. The screen was angled toward the guests, displaying a number I had never intended anyone in this house to see. "Tell me this is a joke," she demanded, her voice laced with something far more dangerous than disbelief. Entitlement. I felt my blood turn to ice. The room erupted into chaos. My mother gasped, pressing a hand to her chest as if she were about to faint. My father's grip on his drink tightened, his eyes narrowing. The guests murmured in hushed, scandalized tones. "You've been sitting on millions while Mom and Dad are struggling?" Callie's voice was shrill, accusatory. My throat was dry. "That's my money, Callie. My business. My work." But she wasn't listening. "You let us suffer!" Eleanor wailed, playing her role to perfection. "We've been drowning in bills, and you never once thought to help us?" Gregory exhaled sharply, shaking his head in disappointment. "We are your parents, Sarah. We raised you, and you just— What? Keep this fortune to yourself?" I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palm. My parents had never struggled a day in their lives. Dad had his pension, and Mom had inherited a hefty sum from Grandma years ago. The truth was, their struggles were Callie's reckless spending, her endless shopping sprees, and their insistence on funding her every whim. I had built my business from nothing. I had worked late nights, skipped vacations, poured my soul into every deal, every investment. They never once asked how I was doing. Only now that they knew, did they care. Callie's smirk was barely concealed behind her feigned outrage. "And you weren't even going to tell us?" I exhaled sharply. "I didn't think I needed to. My success isn't your paycheck." The words landed like a slap. Eleanor gasped, clutching at her pearl necklace. "You ungrateful child?" Gregory's jaw tightened. "Family takes care of each other, Sarah." The guilt-tripping, the manipulation. It was all so predictable, so painfully rehearsed. "If you really loved us," my mother added, voice trembling for dramatic effect, "you would share your success with your family." Something in me snapped. I felt the heat rise to my face, my pulse pounding in my ears. All these years, being ignored, being the afterthought, the backup plan while Callie basked in their attention. And now that I was worth something, they suddenly remembered I existed. I clenched my jaw, biting back the retort burning on my tongue. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of an outburst. Not yet. Callie was watching me closely, waiting for me to cave. Not this time. I pushed back my chair, standing slowly. "Excuse me." And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving behind the shocked silence, the whispers, the murmurs. I wasn't going to let them break me. Not yet. But this was far from over. I barely made it to the hallway before I heard footsteps behind me. "Sarah, sweetheart." My mother's voice was suddenly gentle, too soft, too calculated. "Don't walk away like this." I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers to my temples before turning around. Eleanor stood there, hands clasped together like a grieving widow, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Callie hovered behind her, arms crossed, biting her lip, playing the part of the wounded sister. My father lingered near the dining table, swirling the last of his bourbon in his glass, his face unreadable. The rest of the family was still whispering in the living room, exchanging scandalized glances, but they were pretending not to listen. "We need to talk," Eleanor continued, stepping closer. "Let's not do this in front of everyone." I clenched my jaw. I already knew where this was going. She led me into the sitting room, a space that was meant to be for guests, but was rarely used. Callie and Gregory followed, closing the door behind them. The moment we were all inside, the facade cracked. Eleanor sighed dramatically, sinking onto the couch. Sarah, darling, we're not asking for all your money. Just a little something. A family support fund. I scoffed. A what? Gregory cleared his throat, trying to sound reasonable. You know, something fair. Maybe set aside a few million so we can all feel secure. My stomach twisted. They actually believed this was a rational request. You mean so Callie can keep shopping and taking luxury vacations? I snapped, crossing my arms. Callie gasped, her expression flickering between shock and insult. Wow, Sarah, I didn't know you thought so little of me. I let out a bitter laugh. I know you, Callie. Eleanor's face fell, her disappointment carefully rehearsed. This isn't about Callie. It's about family, about us supporting each other. I stared at her, searching for any sign of sincerity. Funny. You never seemed too worried about supporting me when I was struggling. She flinched, but recovered quickly, shaking her head. That's not fair. We always did what we could. Really? Where were you when I was working 3 jobs in college? When I had to take out loans just to survive? Where were you then? Eleanor opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Gregory sighed, rubbing his temples. We're not trying to start a fight here, but think about it, Sarah. You have $15 million. You could change our lives overnight. Callie nodded eagerly. Exactly! You wouldn't even miss it. I felt my nails dig into my palm. And if I say no? Silence. Eleanor blinked, as if she hadn't considered that possibility. Gregory's grip on his glass tightened. Callie tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Finally, my mother let out a long breath. We just don't understand why you'd want to hoard all of that money when your family, your blood, could use some help. I let out a humorless laugh. Oh, so now we're talking about blood. Where was that blood when I was invisible for the last 15 years? Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. You're being cruel. No, Mom. I'm being honest. The tension in the room was suffocating, but I didn't back down. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. They never cared about my success until they realized it could benefit them. Gregory set his glass down with a thud. You need to think about this. I already have. I turned toward the door. And my answer is no. Eleanor made a wounded noise. Sarah! I walked out, my heart hammering. I expected them to follow me, to drag this out, but they didn't. They just sat there, stunned, as if they truly couldn't believe I was refusing them. Later that night, as I stood in the kitchen refilling my glass of wine, Callie appeared at my side. She sighed, leaning against the counter like we were just 2 sisters catching up. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I arched an eyebrow. For what exactly? She hesitated, chewing on her lip. For how things went down earlier. I got caught up in the moment. I was jealous. I studied her carefully. Her voice was soft, her eyes a little glassy, just enough to appear genuine. I don't want us to fight, she continued. You're my big sister. I want to fix things. I almost believed her. Then she pulled out her phone. If you really want to prove you don't hate me, she said lightly, just help me out a little. My stomach dropped. She turned the screen toward me, a banking app, a joint account ready for a transfer. Not a lot, just something to get me back on my feet. There it was. The mask slipping, the performance ending. I set my wine glass down. No. Her face twisted in frustration. Oh, come on, Sarah. You owe me. I let out a slow breath. Owe you for what, exactly? She scoffed, rolling her eyes. For everything. Do you even know how hard it was for me growing up in your shadow, always being compared to you? I blinked. Are you actually serious right now? Callie's crocodile tears vanished in an instant. You are so selfish. I laughed, an actual full-bodied laugh. Wow, you really had me there for a second. Her jaw clenched. Good night, Callie. I turned my back to her, grabbing my purse. She let out an irritated noise, then stomped out of the kitchen, her heels clicking angrily against the tile. But I knew she wasn't done yet. I stayed in the kitchen for a few more moments, listening to the sound of Callie's angry footsteps retreating down the hall. I exhaled, pressing my fingers to my temples. The night was dragging, each passing hour making this house feel less like home and more like a battlefield. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine, but it did nothing to ease the knot tightening in my stomach. Something was wrong, more than just their greed, more than the blatant manipulation. They weren't just reacting tonight, this was planned. I walked back into the living room, where the remnants of the Christmas gathering were still scattered. Half-empty glasses of wine, wrapping paper torn open in a flurry of greed, the flickering glow of Christmas lights casting long, eerie shadows against the walls. I sank into the armchair near the fireplace, rubbing my temples. The weight of their accusations still clung to me. You let us struggle. If you really loved us, you would share. We are your family. I had spent years convincing myself that I had simply outgrown my family, that our distance was a natural result of adulthood. But tonight had proven something darker. They had never truly cared about me, only what I could give them. And yet, something still didn't sit right. Why had my parents switched so quickly from outrage to negotiation? They should have been furious, humiliated, insulted that I hadn't told them about my wealth. Instead, they had pivoted into damage control like seasoned politicians. I lifted my glass of wine to my lips, but froze. From the kitchen, hushed voices drifted into the living room. I set my glass down and strained to listen. My mother, speaking softly, but with a sharpness that made my stomach turn. We'll have to move quickly. A pause. A second voice, my father. His tone was low, controlled. She's being difficult. You should have waited, Eleanor. Another pause. She wasn't supposed to find out this way, but it doesn't change anything. Then I heard the words that made my breath catch. The lawyer is ready. A cold chill ran down my spine. Financial guardianship. Trust fund. Callie will handle the signatures. My hands curled into fists. I stood, moving toward the kitchen. I knew they would hear me if I got too close, but I had heard enough. This wasn't just guilt-tripping anymore. This was a planned financial takeover. I moved carefully through the hallway toward my mother's study. The door was slightly ajar, and the lamp inside cast a dim golden glow onto the carpet. I stepped inside, scanning the room. And then I saw it. A stack of papers, neatly arranged on her desk. My name was on them. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. The words at the top of the page made my stomach lurch. Vaughn Family Trust Agreement. I skimmed through the legal jargon, my pulse pounding. Trust managers. Eleanor Vaughn, Callie Vaughn. Beneficiary, Sarah Vaughn. I flipped through the next page, my hands trembling. At the bottom, next to a space labeled Signature, there was a neatly drawn line. I had never seen this document before, but they were planning for me to sign it. And if I didn't? My stomach twisted. They were going to find a way to take control of my assets, with or without my consent. The words from the kitchen rang in my ears. The lawyer is ready. I gritted my teeth, rage bubbling under my skin. They weren't just asking me to share. They were trying to take everything. A movement at the door made me spin around. Gregory stood there, frozen. His eyes flickered to the papers in my hand, and in that split second, I saw it. The guilt. The realization that I had caught them too soon. I held up the papers, my voice dangerously calm. What? The hell is this? He didn't answer at first, just let out a long sigh, rubbing his temples like I was the problem. It's for the best, sweetheart, he finally said, stepping inside. You don't understand what's good for you. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. The best? For who? Gregory closed the door behind him. You're young. You don't know how unpredictable money can be. I narrowed my eyes. That's interesting, because I built my entire career on knowing exactly how to manage it. His jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a soft click sounded behind him. Eleanor stepped into the room, her expression unreadable. You weren't supposed to see that yet. I stared at her, searching for some sign that this was a mistake, that she had simply made a poor choice, that she wasn't actively conspiring against me. But there was nothing. No remorse. No regret. Just calculation. I swallowed down the lump rising in my throat. How long have you been planning this? Eleanor's expression didn't waver. This isn't about taking from you, Sarah. It's about protecting you. I clenched my jaw. Right. Because nothing says protection like secretly trying to steal legal control over my assets. Eleanor sighed, tilting her head slightly. You're too emotional about this, I laughed. Too emotional? Callie's voice drifted from the hallway. She's always been paranoid. It's exhausting. I turned sharply to see her standing just outside the door, arms crossed, looking thoroughly unimpressed. She smirked. Honestly, Sarah, why are you making this such a big deal? It's not like we were going to leave you with nothing. I gripped the papers tighter, my hands shaking. There was no way out of this conversation that wouldn't turn into a full-blown war. So I made a decision. I walked past Gregory, past Eleanor, past Callie. I pushed open the study door and stepped out into the hallway. Callie laughed behind me. Oh, don't be so dramatic. I stopped in my tracks, turned slightly. Dramatic? I met her gaze, my own calm and steady. This is the last time you try to steal from me. And with that, I left them standing there, my mind already forming the next move. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to give them one. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the signatures on that trust agreement, the carefully orchestrated betrayal hiding beneath my mother's saccharine voice, Callie's smug little smirk when she thought she had won. But this wasn't over. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating aggressively on my nightstand. I groaned, rolling over, my head pounding from the exhaustion of the night before. The screen was filled with missed calls, dozens of them, messages, voicemails, notifications piling up like a digital avalanche. Something was wrong. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The pit in my stomach grew as I swiped through my notifications. Imogen Clark, 17 missed calls, Imogen Clark. Incoming call. I barely had time to answer before her panicked voice hit me. You need to check Callie's Instagram, now! My stomach dropped. What did she do? I asked, already pulling up the app, dreading the answer. Imogen hesitated. It's bad, Sarah. She really went for it. I clicked on Callie's profile, and there it was. A long, teary-eyed post, the kind designed to rake in as much sympathy as possible. I never wanted to do this, but I can't stay silent anymore. My heart is broken. My own sister, my own blood, has abandoned us in our time of need. We never asked for millions, never demanded anything. We only wanted love and support. But money changes people. I just wish my sister could remember where she came from. My breath hitched. Oh, she was good. The post had already racked up thousands of likes, comments flooding in faster than I could scroll. She sounds selfish AF. If I had millions, my family wouldn't have to ask. Shame on her. Callie, stay strong, girl. You don't need toxic people in your life, even if they're family. Damn, some people get rich and forget who helped them get there. My fingers tightened around the phone as I scrolled through the replies. Then I saw the worst part. Eleanor Vaughn, my own mother, had left a comment. We never asked for much, just a little love and support. It breaks my heart that my own daughter would turn her back on us. I felt the betrayal like a slap. Not just Callie, Mom too. It wasn't enough to ambush me in person, to steal my documents and forge legal agreements. Now they wanted the world to turn against me too. And it was working. By noon, it was everywhere. Callie had tagged influencers, gossip accounts, even a few journalists. The greedy millionaire sister was trending. I scrolled through article after article, each more sensationalized than the last. Meet Sarah Vaughn, the self-made millionaire who refuses to support her struggling family. Exposed. How one woman abandoned her family after making millions. Callie Vaughn speaks out. I just want my sister back. I threw my phone onto the counter, my pulse hammering in my ears. This wasn't just a petty social media fight anymore. This was war. I paced my condo, rage simmering beneath my skin. They had dragged me through the dirt for money, turned me into a villain overnight. My business emails were flooded with clients asking for clarification. A few had already pulled out of deals. The damage wasn't just personal, it was professional. My phone buzzed again. Imogen. Tell me you're not ignoring this, she said the second I picked up. I'm aware. My voice was tight. Then do something, she snapped. Silence is basically an admission of guilt. You need to get ahead of this before it spirals. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. I don't do online fights, Immy. Well, congratulations, she shot back. You're in one. I exhaled slowly. And what do you suggest? Control the narrative. Tell your side. Make a statement. I stared out the window, the Chicago skyline stretching before me. I didn't want to do this, but I knew she was right. I sat at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I started typing. I have always valued my privacy, but in light of the misinformation being spread, I feel the need to address this personally. I love my family, but the situation is far more complicated than what has been presented online. I have never abandoned them, nor have I refused to support them. The truth, however, is something I am not yet ready to fully discuss. But know this, I will not be bullied, guilt-tripped, or publicly shamed into decisions that impact my future. Family is important, but so are boundaries. I hesitated for only a second before hitting post. It took minutes before the backlash hit. Wow, what a PR move. Fake rich people are all the same. Boundaries is just a fancy way of saying you don't want to share, huh? Your family raised you, they deserve a cut. Period. But there were also voices of reason. She doesn't owe them a damn thing. It's always the struggling family members who feel entitled to someone else's hard work. Sarah doesn't have to set herself on fire to keep them warm. The tide wasn't fully turning, but it wasn't drowning me anymore either. Then my phone rang. I already knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. Mom. I took a slow breath. The war wasn't just online anymore. It was about to get personal. I stared at the screen, my mother's name flashing like a warning. The last time I'd let them corner me, I walked away, barely keeping my sanity intact. This time, I wasn't in the mood to play their game. I let the call go to voicemail. Seconds later, another call. Then a text. Mom. We need to talk, Sarah. Don't shut us out. Mom. I know you saw Callie's post. This is getting out of hand. Call me. Mom. It doesn't have to be this way. I clenched my jaw and turned my phone off. It was already this way, and they were the ones who made it so. A few days passed. The online mess hadn't fully died down, but I'd managed to control some of the damage. My clients weren't thrilled with the attention, but they were reassured by my statement. Still, the tension hadn't left me. I felt it lingering like a shadow, waiting for the next move. That move came Thursday morning, at my office. I was sitting in my glass-walled corner office downtown, skimming through emails, when Imogen burst in. She didn't knock. That alone told me something was wrong. They're here, she said out of breath. I frowned. Who? She didn't need to answer. I already knew. I stood, straightening my blazer. Did they have an appointment? Imogen's lips pressed into a thin line. They said they did. Of course they did. I stepped out of my office and into the reception area, where Gregory, Eleanor, and Callie were sitting as if this was a friendly drop-in. Callie was scrolling through her phone, legs crossed, looking utterly unbothered. My father was casually flipping through a magazine, as if he wasn't plotting ways to control my life. My mother. She was sitting there with an expression carefully crafted for maximum pity. She looked up, a soft, motherly smile in place. Sierra, sweetheart. I exhaled slowly. What are you doing here? Gregory stood, adjusting his suit jacket. We just want to talk, no pressure. I folded my arms. That's funny, because the last time you wanted to talk, you were trying to steal my assets. Callie clicked her tongue. God, Sierra, are you ever going to let that go? I turned my glare on her. No. Eleanor sighed, as if I was exhausting her. Let's not do this here. Let's go somewhere private. I laughed, low and humorless. Not a chance. Gregory motioned to my office. Then at least hear us out. That's all we ask. I should have told them to leave right then and there, but I needed to hear what they were planning. So I turned to Imogen. Give us 10 minutes. If they're not gone by then, call security. Callie snorted. Oh, come on, Sarah. You're not really gonna act like we're trespassers. I met her eyes, deadpan. You are trespassers. And with that, I walked into my office, fully aware that I was inviting a pack of wolves into my den. Eleanor sat first, smoothing her dress, eyes darting around like she was mentally cataloging everything I owned. Callie made herself at home, lounging in the chair like she belonged there. Gregory, as always, played the role of the reasonable one. He was the first to speak. You've been through a lot this week, he said, voice even. We just want to help. I leaned back, unimpressed. That's new. Since when have you ever wanted to help me? Eleanor gave me a wounded look. Sierra, don't be like this. I ignored her and turned to Gregory. Say what you came to say. He nodded and reached into his briefcase, sliding a document across the desk. I didn't pick it up. What is this? I asked. Eleanor smiled, too sweet. Just something to ease your burden. I finally glanced down. Financial Management Assistance Agreement. I laughed, sharp and cold. You want me to sign over my company? Gregory's expression didn't change. Of course not. Callie smirked. We just want to help manage things, as a family. I exhaled through my nose, looking at the document again. They had seriously put together a whole legal agreement to take control of my finances, after everything. It wasn't just about the money anymore. They wanted power. I picked up the document, flipping through the pages, before pushing it back across the desk. Get out! Eleanor stiffened. Sierra, don't be hasty. This is what's best for everyone. For you, I corrected. This is what's best for you. Gregory sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. You think you're untouchable, don't you? That got my attention. I tilted my head. Come again? Callie leaned forward, resting her elbows on my desk. If you're not with us, you're against us. I clenched my jaw. I don't negotiate with scammers. Callie's eyes darkened. Careful, Sarah. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. Get out, now. Eleanor's expression shifted instantly. The warmth drained from her eyes, replaced with something sharp, cold. She stood, smoothing her dress, then met my gaze with a slow smile. You're making a big mistake, Sarah. Gregory nodded in agreement. We're still family, don't forget that. Callie didn't say a word, just smirked. Like she already knew something I didn't. I watched them walk out, my pulse pounding. I had seen that look before. It meant trouble was coming. And this time, I wasn't backing down. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. My mother's calculated pity, Gregory's smug condescension, Callie's smirk, the look she always gave me when she thought she'd won. But this time, she hadn't won. I wouldn't let her. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating aggressively on the nightstand. Imogen Clark, 5 missed calls. Imogen Clark, incoming call, I answered groggily. Immy? Her voice was sharp, urgent. Check your bank account. I sat up fast, my pulse spiking. What? Just do it. I threw the blankets off and grabbed my laptop from the desk, fingers shaking as I logged in. And then I saw it. $250,000. Gone. I sucked in a breath. My stomach twisted violently. Callie. There was no other explanation. I scrolled through the transaction details. The money had been transferred to a new account under my name. Except, I hadn't opened any new accounts. My heart pounded. She had forged my authorization. This wasn't manipulation. This wasn't gaslighting. This was theft. I was out of my condo within 15 minutes, moving on autopilot as I drove through the city. I barely registered the lights flashing past, barely felt the steering wheel beneath my fingers. My entire body was buzzing with fury, cold and sharp. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about power, about control, and I had let them have it for far too long. I slammed my car into park outside an office building, barely stopping before I stalked inside. A receptionist looked up, startled. "Ms. Vaughn?" "I need to see Dominic Hale," I said tightly. Dominic Hale was not the kind of man you called unless you were serious about burning bridges. He was my former mentor, an old-school power player, someone who had built his name on ruining people who thought they were untouchable. And today, I was handing him my family on a silver platter. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with a slow, amused smile. "Well, well, if it isn't my favorite former protege." I dropped into the chair opposite him, sliding the bank statements across the desk. "I need to take my family down." Dominic's smile widened slightly. He picked up the papers, scanning them, then whistled. "That's bold, even for them." "Callie forged my signature," I said flatly. "She stole from me." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "And let me guess, this isn't the worst of it?" I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. "It's not." I pulled out another stack of documents, the ones I had found in my mother's study, the preliminary paperwork she had filed, the paperwork that would allow her to legally claim that I was mentally unfit to manage my own finances. Dominic's expression shifted. The amusement vanished, replaced by something far sharper. He read the pages carefully. When he finished, he placed them down and met my gaze. "You know what this means, don't you?" he said quietly. I nodded once. They weren't just trying to guilt me into giving them money. They were trying to take everything. Dominic tapped the papers. "They planned this for months, maybe longer." I swallowed hard. I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow I still was. Dominic leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "So, do you want to play nice?" His lips curled slightly. "Or do you want to destroy them?" I met his eyes, my pulse steady. "I want them to regret ever thinking they could control me." Dominic grinned. "Now that's what I like to hear." I barely had time to breathe. The rage from my meeting with Dominic was still fresh, still simmering beneath my skin like a fire I couldn't put out. I had spent the night sifting through legal documents, tracing every fraudulent move my family had made, my hands shaking with exhaustion and fury. But when my phone rang the next morning, I realized I had underestimated them. "Ms. Vaughn, this is James Larkin from First National Bank. We need to discuss the 6-figure loan you recently took out." I froze. "What loan?" There was a brief hesitation. "The $350,000 business loan secured under your name and credit. The first payment is due in 30 days. I shot up from my chair, knocking over my coffee. "I never took out a loan." Silence. "Ms. Vaughn," Larkin finally said, voice cautious. "The paperwork is signed and processed. We have your signature on file." I already knew what I would find before I even opened the email. And there it was. A perfect forgery of my name. The air left my lungs. Callie. She had used my company's credibility to take out a massive loan, likely betting that I wouldn't notice, or that I wouldn't dare report her. She had taken our feud to another level. I gripped my phone tighter. "I need every single document you have on this loan. Every form. Every signature." Larkin cleared his throat. "We'd be happy to provide you with that. But if there's an issue with this transaction, I'd advise you to resolve it quickly. Non-payment on this loan will have severe consequences for your credit and—" "I'll resolve it." My voice was like steel. I hung up. This wasn't just fraud. This was war. By the time I reached my office, Imogen was already on high alert. She met me at the door, clutching her tablet, her eyes wide. "You know," I nodded sharply. "How long have you known?" "I found out this morning. I was about to call you when the bank did." She glanced at her screen. She was smart about it. She used her business degree for something, I guess. She structured the loan under your corporate entity, leveraging its assets to make it look like a perfectly normal transaction. I clenched my jaw. Callie had always been a leech, but this? This was another level of insanity. Imogen's voice dropped. Sarah, if you don't handle this fast, it could wreck your credit, your business reputation. I inhaled slowly, forcing my hands to unclench. She thinks she's untouchable. She's banking on you not turning her in. I met Imogen's gaze. She bet wrong. The knock on my door came at exactly the wrong time. I had just finished speaking with Dominic, preparing the fraud charges, when the sharp bang, bang, bang echoed through my condo. I already had a bad feeling. I opened the door. A man in a dark suit stood there, holding a thick envelope. Debt collector. Ms. Vaughn? I exhaled slowly. What can I do for you? He gave me a tight smile. We're here to discuss payment options before legal action is pursued. I didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't panic the way Callie had probably assumed I would. Instead, I smiled, cold, dangerous. Oh, you'll get your money. The man hesitated. But not from me. I pulled out my phone and dialed Dominic. File the fraud charges. My tires screeched against the pavement as I pulled up to my parents' house. I wasn't waiting this time. I wasn't giving them another second to plot, to twist things, to try and manipulate their way out. I stormed through the front door, documents in hand. Eleanor and Gregory were in the kitchen, frozen mid-conversation. And then there was Callie. She was curled up on the couch, sipping a ridiculously overpriced latte, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. Until she saw me. Her face went pale. I threw the bank statements onto the coffee table. What did you do, Callie? She blinked. Sarah, what the hell? I cut her off. Don't play dumb. You took out a $350,000 loan under my name. You forged my signature. Her mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. Eleanor stood abruptly. Sarah, I think you're overreacting. I turned to her, eyes blazing. Overreacting? I let out a sharp laugh. Your daughter committed felony fraud and I'm overreacting? Callie finally found her voice. Okay, you need to calm down. I whirled on her. I need to calm down. You stole from me, Callie. She scoffed, but her hands were trembling now. I was going to pay it back. I laughed, loud, sharp, cutting. With what? Your influencer sponsorships? Your $10 Target hauls that you pretend are Chanel? Her nostrils flared. You don't understand how hard things have been for me. I stared at her, utterly disgusted. You don't understand how hard things have been for you? I took a slow, measured step forward. You stole from your own sister. You put my business at risk. You forged legal documents. Callie's breath hitched. I didn't think you'd press charges. I leaned in, my voice ice cold. Well, guess what, Callie? I am. Her face crumbled. Sarah, please. Eleanor stepped forward, voice dripping with desperation. She's your sister. Family forgives. I turned to her, my patience completely gone. Funny. That's what you said when you tried to steal control of my assets. When you tried to have me declared unfit. Eleanor's face twitched. Sarah! I cut her off. Enough. I'm done. You have 1 hour to get Callie a lawyer, because I'm pressing charges. And this time? I met Callie's tear-streaked gaze. You don't get to cry your way out of this. A month had passed. A month since I stood in that courtroom and watched the legal system do what my parents never had. Hold Callie accountable. She took a plea deal, avoided jail. But her life? The one she had carefully constructed with lies and manipulation? It crumbled. She lost her influencer brand deals. Her credit was in ruins. And, perhaps most poetic of all, the bank seized her car. For the first time in years, I could breathe. No more Sunday dinners filled with passive-aggressive remarks. No more gaslighting. No more stolen money. No more watching my family twist reality to suit their needs. I was finally free. I was sitting in my new office, high above Chicago, scanning through contracts, when Imogen strolled in, holding 2 lattes. She placed one on my desk. Decaf. Because I know you haven't been sleeping. I smirked, taking a sip. You're terrifyingly observant. She shrugged. It's why you pay me. Then she leaned against my desk, arms crossed. So, how does it feel? Winning? I thought about it for a second. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like relief. It feels peaceful, I admitted. Imogen smiled knowingly. About damn time. I set my cup down, rolling my shoulders. All right, what's next? She grinned. Dominic's waiting in the conference room, and before you ask, yes, he brought whiskey. I laughed. For the first time in years, I actually laughed. I was halfway through reviewing a new partnership agreement when my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Please meet me. I need to talk. I stared at the message, something cold curling in my stomach. I didn't need to ask who it was. I should have ignored it, but some small masochistic part of me wanted to see. So I went. The cafe was almost empty when I walked in. I spotted Callie immediately. She wasn't wearing designer. No perfect makeup, no expensive jewelry. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, her face bare, shadows under her eyes. She looked human. I slid into the seat across from her, keeping my expression neutral. You wanted to talk. She flinched at my tone. Sarah, She inhaled sharply, rubbing her hands together, like she was trying to hold herself together. I lost everything. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I was stupid. I know that now. I said nothing. She looked up at me, her eyes wet, filled with something close to real regret. I don't know how to fix this. I tilted my head. Fix what? She swallowed. Us. There was a time when hearing that would have cracked something inside me. But now I felt nothing. Not hate, not anger, not even pity, just detachment. Callie reached across the table, her fingers barely brushing mine. Please, Sarah. I pulled away gently. Some things can't be fixed, Callie. Tears slipped down her face. I don't have anyone else. I exhaled slowly, then stood. I pulled a 20 from my wallet, dropping it on the table, enough to cover her coffee. That's not my problem anymore. Then I walked away. And this time, I didn't look back. That night, I sat in my apartment, sipping wine, staring out at the city. My phone buzzed. Dominic, dinner tomorrow? I smiled. For once, I was excited about the future. As I sit here now, looking back at everything I've been through, I realize one thing. Family isn't about blood. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. For years, I believed that if I gave enough, if I forgave enough, if I sacrificed enough, my family would love me the way I deserved. But here's the truth. Some people only love you when you're easy to control. It took losing everything and rebuilding from scratch to understand that I never owed them my success, my money, or my loyalty. I owed myself the chance to live without their weight dragging me down. And maybe you're watching this right now, feeling the same way. Maybe you have family members who manipulate, who guilt you into believing their problems are yours to fix. But let me tell you this. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your success, it's yours. Your peace, it's yours. Your happiness, it belongs to you, not to the people who only show up when they want something. So tell me, have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved for the sake of your own sanity? Let me know in the comments. Drop a 1 if this story resonated with you, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more real, raw stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next, because sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is finally let go. My name is Zara, and this is the story of how my own family tried to erase me. On Thanksgiving, the people who were supposed to love me sat across the table and called me a burden. They told me I wasn't welcome. By the next day, I was out of the house, cut off, discarded, as if I had never mattered. But the betrayal didn't stop there. They drained my bank accounts. They forged my name. They tried to steal my sister from me. And when I fought back, they did everything they could to destroy me, spying on me, threatening me, even breaking into my home. It wasn't just cruelty. It was control. And the worst part? They almost won. I was drowning in their lies, buried under years of manipulation and deceit. But then, I found the one piece of evidence that could take them down for good. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the air, but the warmth of the holiday was nothing more than an illusion. The dining table was set meticulously, fine china, polished silverware, and a perfectly roasted bird sitting in the center. It was the kind of picturesque Thanksgiving scene most families cherished, but beneath the surface, tension simmered like an untended pot on the stove. I sat across from my parents, Darius and Marlo, watching as my younger sister, Selene, twirled her fork absent-mindedly through her mashed potatoes. She was 16, still caught in that delicate space between childhood and adulthood. She looked uneasy, as if she sensed the impending storm before it hit. Darius had been drinking, the red flush creeping up his neck, the way he gripped his glass a little too tightly. It was all too familiar. I knew that look. I had seen it for years. I tried to ignore it, keeping my focus on Selene. "How's school?" I asked, offering her an easy way into conversation, a distraction from whatever mood our father was in tonight. She glanced up, hesitant. "It's fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marlo, my mother, poked at her stuffing but barely touched it. She had the tired, resigned look of a woman who had long stopped fighting battles she knew she would never win. Then it happened. Darius set his fork down with an intentional clatter, the sound slicing through the room like a blade. He leaned back in his chair, fixing his bloodshot gaze on me. "You are a burden, and you can't stay with us anymore." At first, I thought I had misheard him. The words were so absurd, so casually cruel, that my brain refused to register them as reality. The room went still. Even the soft clinking of silverware against porcelain halted. Marlo let out an awkward laugh, but she didn't contradict him. She didn't defend me. She didn't even meet my eyes. Selene, her fork frozen mid-air, stared at me with wide, horrified eyes. I swallowed the piece of turkey I had been chewing, my throat suddenly dry. "What?" Darius exhaled, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You heard me. You've overstayed your welcome. It's time for you to go." I sat there, trying to process his words. I was 34. I had a job. I paid my own bills. No, not just mine. Theirs. I had been paying for the electricity, the internet, and even groceries most weeks. Darius hadn't worked in years, and Marlo's part-time job barely covered anything. Without me, there was no house, no functioning utilities. I turned to my mother, desperate for some sign that this was a mistake, some misunderstanding. But she kept her eyes down, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. "Dad," Selene started, but he cut her off with a glare. "This is my house," he declared, voice sharp. "My rules. And I say she's done here." A hot, burning sensation spread through my chest. Anger, humiliation, the sheer audacity of it all. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to not let them see how deeply they had cut me. "You need me more than I need you," I said finally, my voice eerily calm. Darius scoffed. "You think so?" I let out a humorless laugh. "Who do you think has been keeping this place running? You? Mom?" I shook my head. "I've been paying the bills while you sit around, pretending things will magically fix themselves." Marlo flinched at my words, but Darius didn't even blink. "Doesn't matter," he said. "I'm done. You're leaving." I could feel Selene looking at me, her fear practically radiating across the table. If they could do this to me, what did that mean for her? I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. My movements were slow, deliberate. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I stood, straightened my dress, and calmly set my napkin on the table. Then I walked to the sink, rinsed my hands under the cold water, and dried them with meticulous care. When I turned back, Darius had a smug expression, as if he believed he had won something. Marlowe refused to meet my eyes. Selene looked like she might cry. I gave her a small nod, one that said, "I'm okay, I promise." But I wasn't. Without another word, I turned and walked down the hall to my room, shutting the door behind me. I stood there for a moment, staring at the walls I had lived between for years, at the small space I had carved out for myself, in a house that had never truly felt like home. Then, I reached for my suitcase. As I started packing, I could hear their voices through the thin walls. Marlowe's hushed, worried tone. "We need her money, Darius." His response, flat and unbothered. "We'll figure it out. She's not our problem anymore." A knock on my door. I turned, heart clenching. Selene stood there, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What the hell just happened?" she whispered. I exhaled, shaking my head. "I don't know," I whispered back, "but I'm leaving tomorrow." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, packed my last bag, and stepped into a world that suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. The air outside was sharp, cutting through the thin hoodie I'd thrown on over my sweater. The streets were still dark, a dull winter hush settling over the quiet Chicago neighborhood. I stood there for a moment, watching my breath form small clouds in the frigid air, and then turned back toward the house that had never truly been a home. My fingers curled tighter around the handle of my suitcase. I should have felt something, anger, grief, resentment, but all I felt was relief. I glanced at my phone. No missed calls, no messages from my parents. Just one text from Selene, sent sometime around 2 in the morning. I can't believe they're doing this. Neither could I. I exhaled slowly and stepped back inside, just for a moment. The house was eerily silent, bathed in the dim gray of early morning. No footsteps, no voices, no signs of life. It was as if the whole place had already erased me. I moved through the living room, my footsteps careful, deliberate. The walls still held the same faded family photos, as if nothing had changed, as if I hadn't just been cut off from my own family the night before. In the kitchen, last night's dinner plates sat stacked in the sink, untouched. It was strange. Just hours ago, I had sat at this very table, surrounded by people who had called me family, only to have them discard me like an unwanted guest overstaying their welcome. My father's words echoed in my head. "She's not our problem anymore." I let out a humorless laugh under my breath. Before I left, I had one last thing to do. I sat down on the couch, pulled up my phone, and opened my banking app. Then, one by one, I removed my name from every single bill I had been paying for them. Electricity, water, internet, even Netflix. Every service that had been running under my name, gone. It took less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes to undo years of financial support. I imagined the moment my father would realize it. The confusion, the frustration, the helpless rage when the lights flickered out, when the Wi-Fi stopped working, when their world began to crumble without me quietly holding it together in the background. A smirk tugged at my lips as I stood. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. I made my way toward the hallway, pausing in front of Celine's bedroom door. I wanted to knock, to tell her I was sorry I couldn't take her with me. But what could I say? She was still stuck here. And if she wasn't careful, they'd turn on her next. Instead, I pressed my hand lightly against the wood for just a second, a silent goodbye, before pulling it away. I stepped outside without looking back. The house that had once felt like a cage was behind me now, growing smaller as I walked toward my car, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel lost. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Orion's apartment was across the city, nestled in a quiet, slightly run-down neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but safe, a stark contrast to where I had just come from. By the time I pulled up, the sun had started to rise, casting long shadows against the old brick buildings. Orion didn't ask questions when he opened the door. He just handed me a steaming cup of coffee, as if he had known this day would come. "I don't get how they could do this to you," he said as I stepped inside, setting my bags down. His voice was calm, but I could see the frustration simmering beneath the surface. I sank onto his couch, cradling the coffee between my hands. "I should have left sooner," I admitted. I shook my head. "It doesn't matter now." "They didn't care about you," he said, watching me carefully. "They cared about your paycheck." I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, and now they don't have that either." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app again, checking my savings. Not much, but enough to start over. And then I saw it. A string of notifications, multiple failed login attempts. My stomach twisted. "Darius!" I clenched my fists as I stared at the alerts, my pulse hammering against my ribs. He was trying to access my account. Of course he was. He had never needed me, just my money. And now that it was gone, he was desperate. I immediately called the bank. Within minutes, my account was locked down, passwords changed, security tightened. Fraud alert confirmed. I hung up, exhaling sharply, my fingers still tight around my phone. Orion was watching me. "They're not just letting you go, are they?" I forced a breath into my lungs. "No," I admitted, "but I'm not scared of them anymore." Then, without hesitation, I blocked their numbers, one by one. But deep down, something told me this wasn't over. I thought I had left them behind, but I underestimated how far my father would go to keep his lies intact. For the first time in years, I was finally starting to breathe again. It had been a few days since I walked out of that house for good, and the weight on my chest was beginning to lift. Orion's apartment was small but warm, a quiet refuge from the chaos I had known for so long. That morning, I sat at his kitchen table, my laptop open in front of me, scrolling mindlessly through job listings. I had enough savings to survive for a little while, but not forever. It was time to start rebuilding my life. Then a message popped up on my phone. "I heard you moved out. I hope you're okay." I frowned at the sender, a mutual acquaintance, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Before I could even respond, another message followed. "I'm sorry about what happened with your dad. He said you stormed out on Thanksgiving, yelling at everyone." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. A cold, sinking feeling settled in my stomach. I hadn't told many people about what happened. I had barely had time to process it myself. But somehow, everyone already had a version of the story, and it wasn't the truth. More messages came in. "I can't believe you left your parents like that. Your mom is heartbroken. You should have more respect for your father." I tightened my grip on the phone, my jaw clenching so hard it hurt. This wasn't just gossip. This was Darius. He was controlling the narrative, twisting the truth into something that suited him. He was making me out to be the villain, the selfish daughter who abandoned her family without a second thought. I needed to hear it for myself. I hit dial and pressed the phone to my ear. Solène picked up almost immediately. "Zara?" she asked, her voice cautious. "What the hell is Dad telling people?" I demanded. A pause, then a sigh. "He's saying you had a meltdown," she admitted quietly. "That you got mad at them for no reason and just left." I gripped the phone so tightly my fingers ached. "And Mom?" "She's backing him up." Solène hesitated. "She's not exactly correcting him." Of course she wasn't. I closed my eyes, breathing in through my nose. I had seen my father manipulate people for years, twisting reality to fit his version of events. I had watched him break my mother down, until she became nothing more than an echo of his words. But this was different. This was him trying to erase what actually happened. When I finally spoke, my voice was low, controlled. "He wants me to disappear," I said. "Not just from the house, from the story." Orion, who had been listening quietly from across the room, folded his arms and leaned against the counter. "Your dad's all about control," he said simply. "If he can't control you anymore, he'll control how people see you instead." I exhaled sharply. He was right. And I couldn't let it happen. I opened my phone and stared at my screen for a long moment, my pulse hammering in my ears. I knew what I had to do. I opened my social media account, and I started typing. Let me be clear. I didn't leave my family. They threw me out, and the only reason they're upset is because I was the one keeping the lights on. My thumb hovered over the post button. I knew what would come next. The backlash, the accusations, the messages from relatives telling me to respect my parents and keep family matters private. But I also knew this was the only way to stop my father's lie from becoming the truth. I pressed send. Almost instantly, the notifications started rolling in. Some people supported me, offering words of encouragement. Others attacked me, defending my father's version of the story. I let them, because for the first time, my truth was out there. I refused to let my father erase me from my own story. At first, I thought posting the truth would be enough. But then I started noticing something strange. Someone was watching me. It had been a few days since I exposed my father's lies online. The initial wave of backlash had come and gone, leaving behind a dull, lingering exhaustion. I thought that would be the worst of it. The messages, the judgment, the distant relatives calling me ungrateful without knowing a single damn thing about what had really happened. But something felt off. It was subtle at first, a creeping unease that I tried to ignore. One evening, as I walked back to Orion's apartment, I noticed a car parked across the street. Nothing special, just a dark sedan. But when I came out again later that night, it was still there. The next morning, I stepped outside to take the trash to the curb and found my bin knocked over. Just mine. The other bins lining the street stood perfectly upright. I brushed it off. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe I was just on edge. But then it kept happening. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. A flicker of movement just beyond my vision. The feeling of being watched, even when I was alone. I told myself it was paranoia. Until Orion noticed too. "You've been acting weird," he said one night, leaning against the counter while I stared absently at the window. "What's going on?" I hesitated. If I said it out loud, it would make it real. But something about the way Orion looked at me, calm, steady, waiting, made me realize I wasn't imagining this. "I think someone's watching me," I admitted. His brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" I told him about the car, the trash bin, the feeling I couldn't shake. Orion didn't brush it off. He nodded slowly, his expression turning serious. "If it happens again, tell me right away." That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. with my pulse hammering in my throat. I didn't know why. No sound had woken me. No nightmare had shaken me from sleep. But something felt wrong. I sat up, rubbing my arms against the cold, and my gaze drifted to the window. And then I saw him. A figure stood across the street, just beyond the glow of a street lamp. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just watched. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers fumbled for my phone as I scrambled out of bed, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I hit Orion's number. "Zara?" His voice was groggy but instantly alert. "Look outside," I whispered. Seconds later, I heard his footsteps, the soft rustle of curtains. A pause. Then, "Z, there's no one there." I pressed my forehead against the window, my stomach twisting. The figure was gone. I wasn't losing my mind. Someone had been there. And now they weren't. The next morning, my phone buzzed as I was making coffee. "Selene." I answered immediately. "Hey." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I think Dad knows where you are." I froze. "What?" "He was on the computer last night," she said, her words tumbling out fast and anxious. "I saw your old address, the one with Orion. He had it written down in some notes. Mom tried to stop him, but he said—" She hesitated. "Said what, Selene?" She swallowed hard. he said. She doesn't get to just walk away. A shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was a warning. I lowered the phone slowly, my fingers gripping it so tightly they ached. Orion walked into the room, took one look at my face, and his expression darkened. What happened? I showed him my phone. The missed calls. The unknown number that had tried to log into my email. He exhaled sharply. Zara, this isn't just harassment. This is stalking. The words settled between us like a loaded gun. We need to go to the police, he said. I hesitated. A part of me wanted to handle this on my own, to not escalate things. But the truth was, they were already escalating, whether I wanted them to or not. I didn't know how far he'd go, but I didn't want to wait until I found out. The next morning, I got an email alert. Someone had just opened a bank account in my name. At first, I thought I had read it wrong. My mind was still sluggish from sleep, my fingers slow, as I tapped on the subject line. New bank account confirmation. Thank you for your application. My stomach dropped. I never applied for a new account. My thumb hovered over the screen before I forced myself to scroll. The email contained my full name, my date of birth, even the last 4 digits of my social security number. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a phishing scam, this was real. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs, as I switched to my banking app, checking my accounts. Nothing missing, no withdrawals. But that didn't mean I was safe. I opened my credit monitoring app and stared at the screen. Multiple inquiries. Someone was trying to open lines of credit under my name. I gritted my teeth. Darius. This had his fingerprints all over it. He wasn't just trying to intimidate me anymore. He was trying to financially ruin me. I snatched my phone off the nightstand and dialed the bank's fraud department. The line rang twice before a chipper voice answered. Thank you for calling First Federal Banking Services. How can I assist you today? I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice to stay even. I just received an email confirming a bank account was opened in my name. I never applied for it. This is fraud. The rep hesitated. Let me pull up the application. Can I have the last 4 digits of your social security number? I rattled it off, my fingers digging into my thigh as I waited. A few seconds of typing, then, I see the account was opened just this morning. It looks like, a pause. Ma'am, the application came from an IP address associated with your old home address. I went still. I knew what that meant. Darius wasn't even trying to hide it. The rage that boiled inside me was white hot, but I swallowed it down. I had to stay calm. I need this shut down immediately, I said. Of course, the rep assured me. I'll escalate this to our fraud team and freeze the account, but I highly recommend you freeze your credit and file a police report as well. I exhaled slowly, nodding even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, I'll take care of it. But as I ended the call, my hands were still shaking. He wasn't just messing with me anymore. He was trying to destroy me. Orion found me pacing the living room when he came out of his bedroom, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Zara, he asked, voice groggy. What's wrong? I spun toward him, my phone still clutched in my hand. My father just tried to open a bank account under my name, I said, my voice tight. I caught it before any money moved, but he's already hitting my credit. Orion's sleepy expression vanished. His posture stiffened, eyes narrowing. Are you serious? He's using my old information, Orion. I gestured sharply toward my phone. He's committing a felony! Orion exhaled through his nose, the way he always did when he was barely holding back anger. That's it. We're going to the police. Today. I hesitated. Reporting my own father? Taking legal action against him? It felt heavy. Wrong somehow, even though I knew he was the one doing something wrong. But if I didn't do this, he wouldn't stop. I lifted my chin. Okay. An hour later, I sat across from a police officer at a dull gray desk in the precinct. The officer, Detective Simmons, according to his nameplate, watched me over his notepad, pen poised. Tell me exactly what happened, he said. I forced my hands to stay steady as I handed over my phone. My father stole my identity and attempted financial fraud, I said, keeping my voice firm. He opened a fake account in my name and attempted to apply for credit lines using my information. Simmons nodded, flipping through the screenshots I had taken of the emails, the bank's confirmation, the failed credit applications. This is serious, he said. We'll open an investigation. I exhaled, tension loosening in my shoulders. But as Orion and I walked out of the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Darius wasn't in jail. He still had access to my information, and I knew one thing for sure. If he thought I was going to let him get away with this, he was about to be very disappointed. The moment I got back to Orion's apartment, I got another shock. My mother had just sold my laptop. I barely had time to take off my coat before my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting another fraud alert, another message from some distant relative regurgitating my father's lies. But it wasn't that. It was from Selene. Selene, Mom sold your laptop. For a second, my brain refused to process the words. I read the message again, and again. And then, the rage hit me like a freight train. I dropped onto the couch, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Me. Are you serious? Selene. She took it to a pawn shop this morning. I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. Me. That was my laptop. It had everything on it. Selene. I know. I clenched my jaw so tightly my teeth ached. That laptop wasn't just a piece of technology. It was my entire work portfolio, my financial stability, my future. It had years of projects, client files, everything I needed to rebuild my life. And my mother had just sold it. I hit dial and pressed the phone to my ear. Marlo picked up on the second ring. Zara, she sighed, as if she had been expecting this call. I didn't even try to keep my voice calm. Did you seriously sell my laptop? You left it behind, she said, voice flat. It was in our house. That makes it ours. I gripped the phone so hard I thought I might crush it. That's not how ownership works, Marlo. She exhaled through her nose. We needed the money. My stomach twisted. You needed the money? I repeated. Then why not sell something of yours? No response. I forced myself to breathe evenly. That laptop had my entire career on it, I said, my voice low, controlled. Everything I need to make a living. And you... My throat tightened. You stole it. She didn't even sound guilty. You left, Zara. Actions have consequences. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't about survival. This was punishment. I hung up before I could scream. Orion, who had been silently watching me from across the room, arched a brow. Let me guess, he said. Your mother suddenly thinks she has squatter's rights to your stuff? I threw my phone onto the couch. She pawned it. She actually... I let out a short, humorless laugh. She sold my laptop just to get back at me. Orion frowned, crossing his arms. Which shop? I blinked. What? He grabbed his keys from the counter. We're getting it back. I took a shaky breath. I can track it. He gave me a look. Then start tracking. I sat down, opening my laptop and logging into my account. My fingers moved automatically, pulling up the tracking system. I had set it up years ago, a precaution I never thought I'd actually need. A few seconds later, the location popped up. A pawn shop in downtown Chicago. My hands curled into fists. Got it, I muttered. Orion nodded. Let's go. The pawn shop was exactly what I expected. Dim lighting, crowded glass cases filled with electronics, jewelry, and cheap guitars. I walked in first, Orion right behind me. The man behind the counter barely looked up from his phone. Help you? He asked, not bothering to sound interested. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. Someone sold you a laptop this morning, a MacBook Pro, space gray, serial number registered to my name. The guy scratched his beard. We don't do refunds. I exhaled sharply. I'm not asking for a refund. That laptop was stolen. That got his attention. He set his phone down. Lady, I don't know what to tell you. I pulled out my phone and held up the tracking screen. See this? That's my laptop in your store. Either you give it back, or I call the cops and report you for trafficking stolen goods. Orion folded his arms, towering behind me. Your choice, man. The owner's eyes darted between us. He hesitated for a moment too long, and I could see the calculation happening in his head. Then, with a reluctant sigh, he turned and walked toward the back. A minute later, he returned with my laptop. I snatched it the second it hit the counter, checking it over. My fingers trembled slightly as I powered it on, waiting for the familiar screen to appear. Everything was still there. I exhaled, pressing the laptop to my chest like it was a lifeline. Thanks for your cooperation, Orion said dryly. We walked out without another word. Back at Orion's apartment, I set the laptop on the coffee table, staring at it. I should have been relieved, and I was. But underneath that relief was something sharper, colder. This wasn't about money, it was about control. And I was done letting them take from me. But the moment I thought I had won, I found out my father was walking free. I was in the kitchen, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing, still trying to shake off the exhaustion from the last few days. My stolen laptop was back, my accounts were secure. For the first time in weeks, I had let myself believe that things were settling down. Then my phone rang. I saw Selene's name and felt a brief flicker of relief. She was the only part of my family I still cared about, but the second I answered, I knew something was wrong. Her breathing was shaky, her voice barely above a whisper. Dad's out. The mug in my hand nearly slipped from my grasp. I tightened my grip, my fingers digging into the ceramic. What? Someone posted his bail last night, she rushed on. I don't know who. I just heard Mom talking to him on the phone. A chill ran down my spine. Darius wasn't supposed to be out. Not yet. He had been arrested for identity theft, fraud, and harassment, charges that should have kept him locked up. Selene, are you safe? My voice came out sharper than I intended. I don't know, she admitted. Mom won't tell me anything. She just kept saying it's handled, like that means anything. I could feel my pulse thudding in my ears. Who the hell would bail him out? I barely remembered hanging up before turning to Orion. My stomach twisted in knots. He's out, I said, voice hollow. Someone paid his bail. Orion's expression darkened instantly. That doesn't make sense. Who the hell would waste money on him? I had the same question. Marlo was the obvious answer. She had never had a spine when it came to my father. But this wasn't like her. She had been scared. I could hear it in her voice that night when she tried to reason with him before kicking me out. She wouldn't risk everything for him, which meant someone else had. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Court records, recent bail payments, anything I could find. Orion leaned over my shoulder. Check the third-party bondsman, he suggested. I clicked through a few links, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed. And then I found it. A name I didn't recognize. The person who posted Darius's bail wasn't Marlo. It was a stranger. I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. Who the hell is Jonathan Calloway? Orion frowned. Never heard of him, but if he's got money to bail out your father, he's either really generous or he's got skin in the game. A sinking feeling settled in my gut. What if this isn't just about my dad? I murmured. What if someone else has a reason to keep him out? Neither of us had an answer, but deep down, I knew. This was bigger than Darius now. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind wouldn't stop racing. Who was Jonathan Calloway? What did he have to gain from keeping Darius out of jail? And more importantly, what did that mean for me? I tossed and turned, sleep just out of reach, until my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I grabbed it, squinting at the screen. Unknown number. You think you won? Watch your back. My hands clenched around the phone. A slow, cold dread trickled down my spine. This wasn't Darius's style. He was blunt, aggressive. If he wanted to scare me, he would have done it directly. This was someone else. I turned the screen toward Orion, who was still awake, scrolling through his own phone. His face darkened the second he read the message. This isn't just your father anymore, he muttered. I swallowed hard. No, I admitted. It's not. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I changed the locks at Orion's apartment, filed a restraining order, locked down my accounts even further. I was preparing for the worst, because whoever had freed my father wasn't done, and I knew he was coming for me. The only question was when. And then, just as I feared, he came after the one person I couldn't protect, Selene. It had been 3 days since Darius was bailed out, and I had been living in a state of constant tension. Every shadow outside Orion's apartment, every unknown number that popped up on my phone, made my pulse quicken. I had been expecting a direct confrontation, a knock on the door, a threat, maybe even worse. But when the attack finally came, it wasn't aimed at me. It came in the form of a thick envelope shoved into Orion's mailbox. I almost didn't open it at first, thinking it was another bill or some junk mail. But then I saw the return address, Cook County Family Court. My stomach twisted as I ripped it open, my hands shaking. My eyes skimmed over the words, but my brain refused to process them at first. Petition for legal guardianship. I felt the blood drain from my face. Darius and Marlo weren't just trying to control me anymore. They were trying to take Selene. I barely registered Orion's voice behind me. Zara! What is it? I turned, gripping the papers so tightly the edges crumpled. They're suing for custody of Selene. Orion's brows furrowed as he took the papers from my hands, scanning them quickly. What the hell? On what grounds? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. They're claiming I'm unstable and financially irresponsible, that I abandoned my family, that Selene is better off with them. Orion let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. So now that they don't have your money, they're using your sister as leverage. I could barely breathe. This wasn't about Selene's well-being. This was about control. This was revenge. The court date was set for a week from now. Far too soon for me to prepare. I sat at Orion's kitchen table, reading the lawsuit over and over again, looking for something, anything, that would give me an edge. Every word on the page was a lie. That I had left Selene behind without concern. That I had refused to help my family in times of financial struggle. That I was reckless, irresponsible, unfit to have any influence over my sister's life. I gritted my teeth, my hands balling into fists. They're painting me like some selfish, immature kid who threw a tantrum and ran away. Orion exhaled sharply. Because that's the only way they win. They can't attack you with the truth, so they're rewriting the narrative again. I closed my eyes, my pulse pounding in my ears. And if they win? Orion hesitated, then sighed. Then Selene is legally under their control. Until she's 18, they can dictate where she lives, what she does, and who she can talk to. A sick feeling coiled in my stomach. If they won, they could cut her off from me completely. I grabbed my phone and dialed Selene's number. She answered on the first ring. Zara? Her voice was quiet, small, like she had been waiting for this call but dreading it at the same time. I took a deep breath. Did you know about this? A pause. Then, barely above a whisper, yes. My heart clenched. Selene, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know what to do, she admitted. Dad keeps saying if I testify against you, he'll stop being so strict with me. My grip tightened on the phone. And you believe him? No, she whispered. But what if he wins? I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my forehead. He won't, I said. I won't let him. Silence. Then, finally, I don't want to be stuck here, Zara. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I know, baby, I know. That night, I sat in Orion's living room, scrolling through lawyers online, my hands still shaking. I had never fought a legal battle before, but I was about to. I hired an attorney first thing the next morning. I gathered every scrap of evidence I had, bank records proving I paid for household bills, texts from Selene detailing my parents' neglect, every piece of documentation that proved they were the unfit ones, not me. But I knew this wouldn't be a fair fight. Darius played dirty, and he wasn't just trying to take my sister. He was trying to destroy me. I exhaled slowly, my hands curling into fists, If my father wanted a war, I murmured, he was about to get one. But I underestimated just how far he would go to win. I sat in the stiff leather chair of Rachel Sinclair's office, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles ached. The weight of the lawsuit, the impending court battle, and now this, it was all pressing down on me like an avalanche. Rachel, my attorney, leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning the stack of documents in front of her. She was a woman in her 40s, polished and professional, the kind of person who had seen every dirty trick in the book. But even she looked troubled. "Your father isn't just arguing for guardianship," she said. "He's accusing you of fraud." I blinked. "Fraud?" Rachel nodded, sliding the papers toward me. "Take a look." I hesitated before picking them up, flipping through the stack. The first document stopped me cold. A lease agreement, supposedly signed by me. Except I had never lived at this address in my life. The paper detailed months of unpaid rent, making it look like I had left behind massive debts. The next document was worse. A credit card statement, from an account I had never opened, followed by a bank transfer record, showing that I had supposedly borrowed money from Darius. Thousands of dollars. Money he was now claiming I had refused to repay. I felt physically ill. "This is all fake," I said, my voice shaking. "I never signed that lease. I never opened that card. And I sure as hell never borrowed money from him." Rachel exhaled through her nose. "I believe you. Then why do you look like I'm already losing?" She tapped the papers with a manicured finger. "Because in court, perception is everything. If these documents hold up, the judge might see you as reckless and financially unstable. That makes your father's argument stronger." I clenched my fists. "None of this is real." "It doesn't have to be," she said grimly. "It just has to be convincing enough." I swallowed hard. Darius wasn't just trying to take Selene. He was trying to destroy my entire life. Orion paced the length of my apartment while I sat frozen on the couch, my mind spinning. "He forged documents?" he asked, his voice edged with fury. I nodded, rubbing my temples. "A fake lease, fake debt, fake loans." Orion let out a harsh laugh. "This guy doesn't quit." "He doesn't need me gone," I murmured. "He needs me ruined." Orion crossed his arms. "How much time do we have before court?" "Less than a week," I said, my stomach twisting. "Then we find a way to prove he's lying." I called Selene that night. She picked up on the first ring. "Zara? Did you see Dad working on any documents recently?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. Silence. Then, finally, a hesitant, I think Mom helped him." I squeezed my eyes shut, a fresh wave of nausea washing over me. I should have known. Marlo had never stopped him, not once. But now, she wasn't just watching him do it. She was helping. I didn't sleep that night. Orion and I spent hours poring over the documents, looking for any flaw, any inconsistency. "If he faked this, we just need to prove it," Orion said. I nodded, determination hardening in my chest. We came up with a plan. Contact my old landlord. If the lease was fake, they'd confirm I never lived there. Pull my official bank statements. The so-called loan from Darius? It didn't exist. Request credit bureau records. If the credit card was opened fraudulently, we'd find out. Hire a forensic document analyst. A specialist could prove my signature was forged. This wasn't just about winning anymore. This was about exposing him. I clenched my fists. He thought he could bury me in lies. But I was about to dig him out of them. Then the threats started coming in. I was sitting at Orion's kitchen table, laptop open, sifting through financial statements and legal paperwork, searching for anything that would dismantle my father's fabricated evidence. The glow from the screen was the only light in the room, casting sharp shadows along the walls. I was exhausted, running on nothing but caffeine and sheer rage, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. My pulse quickened as I hesitated. Another buzz. A text. "Drop the case or you'll regret it." I sat up straighter, my grip tightening around the phone. The air in the apartment suddenly felt colder. this wasn't just a legal battle anymore. Someone wanted to scare me into silence. I swallowed hard, reading the message again, trying to steady my breathing. Could this be my father? No, this wasn't his style. He was a brute, not subtle enough for anonymous threats. Whoever sent this was calculated, someone working in the background. I pushed back from the table and walked into the living room, where Orion was stretched out on the couch, flipping through his phone. "Look at this," I said, holding my screen out to him. He read the message, his expression darkening. "Jesus!" He sat up. "Did you recognize the number?" I shook my head. "It's unlisted." Orion exhaled sharply, rubbing his jaw. "This isn't just harassment anymore." "No," I agreed. "It's a warning." We went to the police station the next morning, and the entire experience was infuriating. The officer behind the desk, a tired-looking man in his 40s, barely glanced at my phone before sighing. "This could be a prank," he said. "Unless there's direct physical harm or evidence of an imminent threat, there's not much we can do." I gritted my teeth. "So, I have to wait until someone actually hurts me before you'll step in?" His mouth pressed into a thin line. "I can file a report, but I'll be honest with you. Without proof of who sent it, this won't go anywhere." I wanted to scream. Instead, I snatched my phone back, thanked him through clenched teeth, and stormed out of the station. Outside, Orion muttered, "Unbelievable." "Yeah," I said bitterly. "They won't do anything until it's too late." That was the moment I realized I had to protect myself. Orion helped me set up new security measures. Extra locks, a camera at the front door, motion sensors. It was more than I had ever needed before. But something in my gut told me this was only the beginning. The next morning, Selene called me in a panic. Her voice was high and shaky. "Zara, he knows." I froze. "Knows what?" "Dad found out you're fighting the fraud claims," she said quickly. "And he's furious." I clenched my jaw. "Of course he is. He didn't expect me to push back." Selene was breathing fast. He said if you don't drop it, he'll make sure I never see you again." Ice spread through my veins. "What does that mean?" She hesitated. "He's talking about sending me away, a school across the country, somewhere you can't find me." I gripped the edge of the table. That bastard. This wasn't just a fight over custody anymore. Darius was using Selene as leverage. I exhaled, forcing myself to sound calm. "Listen to me, Selene. He doesn't get to decide that. You have a say in where you go." She let out a small, humorless laugh. "You really think he cares about that?" Number I didn't. But there had to be a way to stop him. That afternoon, I met with Rachel, my lawyer. "What happens if they try to move Selene before the hearing?" I asked, my voice tight. Rachel frowned. "Legally, they're still her guardians. If they choose to relocate her, it's within their rights." "So I can't stop them?" She hesitated. "We can file an emergency injunction, but we need proof of intent, emails, messages, anything that confirms they're planning to send her away before the case is settled." I nodded, already forming a plan in my mind. I wouldn't let this happen. I wouldn't let them take her from me. That night, I opened my social media account. I had tried to keep this fight private, keep the chaos contained to legal papers and courtrooms. But now, I was done being quiet. I started typing. "No matter what threats they throw at me, I will not be silent, and I will not let them take Selene away from me." I hit post. Almost immediately, comments started pouring in. Support, concern, people offering advice, legal contacts, words of encouragement, and then, another notification, a private message. Unknown number. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" I exhaled slowly, my fingers curling around my phone. I wasn't scared anymore. If my father wanted to scare me, he made one mistake. He underestimated how far I'd go to fight for my sister. Then, just when I thought I was prepared, my mother made her next move. I had spent the past 48 hours bracing for the next attack. I was coordinating with Rachel, my lawyer, gathering everything I could to stop my father from relocating Selene. I had even started feeling something I hadn't in weeks: control. Then the call came. I was in Orion's apartment, my laptop open, scrolling through legal documents, when my phone rang. Rachel. I answered immediately. Hey, what's up? Her voice was tense. Zara, your mother just filed a legal document in your name. I sat up straight, the hairs on my arms rising. What? Rachel hesitated. It's bad. You need to come in, now. I practically ran into Rachel's office 20 minutes later. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Instead, she handed me a piece of paper, her lips pressed into a firm line. I took it, my eyes scanning over the words. And then, I froze. It was a legal affidavit, a sworn statement, signed by me. Only, I had never seen it before. I felt my stomach churn as I read the contents. In it, I supposedly declared that I was voluntarily giving up all financial and custodial claims to my family. That I wanted no involvement with Selene. That I had renounced my right to challenge anything related to my parents in court. I felt my hands start to tremble. This isn't real, I whispered. Rachel nodded grimly. We know that. But the judge doesn't. I looked at the bottom of the page. My signature. Or at least a version of it. A hemicytphony. I slammed the paper down on Rachel's desk. She forged my signature. Rachel sighed. Yes. And unless we act fast, this document could be used as evidence against you in court. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just deception. This was a crime. And my own mother had done it. The drive back to Orion's apartment was a blur. I barely registered the city lights streaking past, the noise of traffic, the dull hum of the radio. All I could hear was her voice in my head. You walked away, Zara. Now we're making sure you stay gone. Marlo had never been like my father. She wasn't loud, violent, or explosive. She was worse. She let things happen. She allowed my father to do the damage while she stood by, pretending she had no power. But now she wasn't standing by. She was actively helping destroy me. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed. She picked up after 2 rings. I didn't wait for her to speak. You forged my signature, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Do you realize what you've done? A pause. Then coldly, you left us, Zara. You made your choice. I clenched my jaw. That's not an answer. You should have never come back into our lives, she continued, her tone smooth, detached. This is what's best for everyone. My grip on the phone tightened so hard my knuckles turned white. You're going to jail, Mom, I said, my voice deadly, because I'm pressing charges. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse and filed a criminal complaint for forgery. Rachel helped me file an emergency legal hold, preventing them from using the fraudulent document in court. By noon, a judge had signed off on it. Marlo's move had failed. For now. I stepped outside the courthouse and exhaled slowly, feeling the crisp Chicago air hit my face. Orion was waiting by the car, watching me closely. How bad is it? I let out a dry laugh. My own mother tried to erase me from my life, but now, I'm about to erase her freedom. But just as I prepared for the legal battle, I discovered the truth about who bailed out my father. I was sitting across from Rachel in her office, poring over the forged affidavit, preparing for the next step in our case against my mother. The tension in my shoulders hadn't eased in days, and I was running on little sleep and too much caffeine. Rachel was flipping through documents on her screen when she suddenly stopped, her brows knitting together. Zara, she said, her voice sharp. You're not going to believe this. I looked up, my pulse spiking. What? She turned the monitor toward me. I was reviewing the bail records for your father, expecting to see Marlo's name, or maybe even an old friend of his. But it's not her. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Then who? Rachel clicked a few keys, enlarging a section of the screen. A name stood out in bold print. Jonathan Calloway. I leaned forward, my mouth going dry. Who the hell is Jonathan Calloway? Rachel shook her head. That's what I'm about to find out. By the time I got back to Orion's apartment, my mind was racing. Jonathan Calloway. The name meant nothing to me, but something about it sent a shiver down my spine. Orion was sitting on the couch, flipping through his laptop. He glanced up as I walked in. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I tossed my bag onto the table. "I might as well have. Someone named Jonathan Calloway posted my father's bail." Orion's brows shot up. "Who?" "Exactly." I sat down beside him, running a hand through my hair. "Rachel's looking into him now, but I don't recognize the name. I've never met him, never heard of him. Why would some stranger bail out my father?" Orion frowned, already typing. "Let's see what we can find." It didn't take long. A few minutes later, Orion turned the laptop toward me, his expression dark. "Zara, this guy is a major donor for a law firm specializing in aggressive family litigation." My blood turned to ice. I scanned the screen. Jonathan Calloway was a wealthy businessman in Chicago, with investments in real estate, private security firms, and high-profile legal cases. There was nothing tying him to my father, at least not on the surface, but if he was involved in family law disputes, then... I exhaled sharply. "What if he's backing my father's lawsuit?" Orion's jaw tightened. "Then you're not just fighting your parents anymore. You're fighting someone with money, power, and influence." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. Darius wasn't just a bitter man clinging to control. He had help, and now I had to figure out why. The call came late that night. I was in the kitchen, reheating leftovers, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated. My gut told me not to answer, but something in me, the same reckless part that refused to back down, made me press accept. I lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello?" Silence. Then a deep, composed voice spoke. "You're making a mistake, Ms. Bennett." My grip tightened around the phone. "Who is this?" The voice remained calm, deliberate. "Some battles aren't worth fighting." A chill ran down my spine. I opened my mouth to respond, but the line went dead. I pulled the phone away, staring at the screen. No number, no trace. Orion walked in, rubbing his eyes. "What's wrong?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Jonathan Calloway knows I'm onto him." Orion's face darkened. "What did he say?" I clenched my jaw, my pulse pounding. "He told me to stop fighting." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Orion crossed his arms. "So what are you gonna do?" I lifted my chin, a slow burn of determination spreading through me. I wasn't just fighting my parents anymore. I was fighting someone powerful, and he had just made his first move. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, my apartment was broken into. I was alone at Orion's place. He had left for work an hour ago, and I was hunched over my laptop, digging through every trace of Jonathan Calloway I could find. My fingers ached from typing, my eyes burned from staring at the screen, but I couldn't stop. I needed to understand why this man was helping my father. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of traffic outside. And then, a noise from the living room, a soft click, followed by a creak. I froze. The air shifted. Someone was in the apartment. I turned my head slowly toward the front door, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then the door swung open. The intruder stepped inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in all black, with a mask covering his face. Not a random thief. This wasn't a burglary. He moved with purpose. He was here for me. For half a second, I was frozen in place, my mind scrambling to process what was happening. Then instinct kicked in. I grabbed the heavy ceramic lamp from the side table and hurled it across the room. The lamp smashed against the wall, missing him by inches. He lunged. I barely dodged, twisting away and sprinting toward the bedroom. My heartbeat was a frantic drum against my ribs as I slammed the door shut and locked it. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone. 9:11. The pounding started immediately, a fist slamming against the door, And then a voice, low, distorted, unrecognizable. "Drop the case. This is your last warning." My breath hitched. He knew about the lawsuit. This wasn't random. This was a message. I backed away, gripping my phone tighter, my voice barely steady as I spoke into the receiver. "Someone's in my apartment. I'm locked in a room. Please, send help." The operator's voice was calm, asking for details, but I could barely focus. Footsteps. The intruder was moving. Would he try to break down the door? Would he? Then, silence. I didn't dare breathe. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then I heard it, the wail of approaching sirens. And just like that, he was gone. By the time the police arrived, the apartment door was wide open, the cold night air creeping in. Orion came rushing in a few minutes later, panic all over his face. "Zara!" He grabbed my arms, looking me over. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, still shaken. "No, but—" "He was here, Orion. He knew about the lawsuit. He told me to drop it. The police were searching the place, taking my statement, but the officer's tone was grim." "No fingerprints," he muttered, shaking his head. "Whoever this was, they knew what they were doing." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Orion's grip on my shoulder tightened. "This wasn't just a break-in," he said. His voice was low, firm, deadly serious. I nodded. "It was a warning." I took a slow breath, my pulse still erratic, but one thing was clear. If they thought I was backing down, they clearly didn't know me at all. Then I found the hidden device, and realized I had been watched for weeks. I hadn't slept. The break-in, the masked intruder, the whispered threat, it was all still too fresh. My body was exhausted, but my mind refused to shut down. Every noise, every shift of the wind outside, made my muscles tense. Orion had barely left my side since the police left, and now, in the morning light, he paced my apartment, scanning every inch like he expected another attack. "If they got in once," he said, running a hand through his hair, "they can do it again." I nodded, gripping my coffee mug so tightly I thought it might crack. "We need to check for, I don't know, anything. A clue, something they left behind." Orion frowned but didn't argue. He grabbed his phone, switched on the flashlight, and started methodically searching. I stayed quiet, watching him move. The adrenaline from last night had faded into something worse. Unease, paranoia, dread. And then Orion stopped. He was crouched under my desk, his fingers running along the underside of the wooden surface. "Wait, what is this?" I sat up straight. "What?" He pulled something free and held it up. A tiny black square, barely the size of a fingernail. A recording device. My stomach dropped. I took it from Orion, staring at it like it might burn me. "Is this a tracker?" Orion shook his head, already reaching for his laptop. It's a microphone." My throat tightened. "A microphone?" Orion's fingers flew across the keyboard as he plugged it in. "Let's see what it's been picking up." A second later, a file appeared on his screen. He hit play, and my own voice filled the room. Weeks' worth of conversations. Me talking to Rachel about the lawsuit. Me telling Selene to be careful. Me planning every single move I had made. I felt sick. Someone had been listening. Someone knew everything. I grabbed the desk for support, my legs suddenly weak. "How long has this been here?" Orion scrolled through the timestamps. His jaw clenched. "Weeks!" I exhaled sharply. "It had to be from the break-in, right?" He hesitated. Then he shook his head. The timestamps go back before that." My chest tightened. "Which means, whoever planted this," Orion said grimly, "was inside long before last night?" My pulse pounded. This wasn't just my father. This wasn't just some petty family revenge. Someone else was pulling the strings. I refused to let them silence me. If they wanted to hide in the shadows, I would drag them into the light. I grabbed my phone and hit record. The camera blinked to life, my own face staring back at me. I took a breath. For weeks, someone has been spying on me. They broke into my apartment. They planted a device to listen to my conversations. They've threatened me, tried to scare me into silence. But I want you all to know, I'm not going anywhere. I hit post. Within minutes, the video started spreading. People shared it, commented, demanded answers. The message was clear. I was being watched, and now the world was watching back. And then, as I sat there watching the views climb, my phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. You shouldn't have done that. A chill ran down my spine. For the first time, I was afraid. Not just for me, but for what they might do next. And then, I found the evidence that could destroy them. The fallout from my video was immediate. News outlets started picking it up. My inbox flooded with messages. Some of them were support, others were warnings. But the one that mattered most came late that night. A text from Selene. I found something. In Dad's office. My stomach tightened as I read her next message. You need to see this. I called her immediately, heart pounding. What did you find? She hesitated, her voice hushed. I don't know exactly, but it's bad. Emails, bank stuff, things with Calloway's name all over them. My breath hitched. Selene, I said carefully, can you get it to me? Silence. Then a whisper. I'll figure it out. The next night, Selene snuck out. I met her at a late-night diner on the outskirts of town, the kind with flickering neon lights and the smell of burnt coffee in the air. She slid into the booth across from me, her hoodie pulled up, her hands gripping a thick, worn file folder. She looked around nervously. If he finds out I took this— He won't, I said firmly. You're safe with me. Her hands trembled as she pushed the folder toward me. I flipped it open, and the world shifted beneath me. Bank statements, large, unexplained deposits, money moving between accounts I didn't recognize. Emails, messages between Darius and Jonathan Calloway, discussions about controlling my finances, about making sure I stayed out of the way. And then, at the bottom of the stack, a contract, a signed agreement between my father and Calloway. I scanned the words, my breath coming fast. Calloway had paid my father, not just to keep me out of the lawsuit, but to ensure my silence permanently. A lump formed in my throat. This wasn't just about custody. This wasn't just about revenge. They had planned to erase me from my own life. I looked up at Selene. She was watching me, her face pale. Zara, she whispered, what are you going to do? I set the papers down, my hands steady despite the rage burning through me. I'm going to end this. The moment I stepped out of the diner, I called Rachel. She picked up on the first ring. I have what we need to win, I said, my voice deadly calm. Rachel's tone sharpened. What did you find? Proof, I said. Fraud, financial crimes, conspiracy, enough to take down both of them. A pause. Then, her voice turned steel. Then let's end this. The next morning, I walked into Rachel's office and handed over the evidence that would bury them. Within hours, everything was in motion. Court orders, subpoenas, investigations into Darius and Calloway's financial dealings. By midday, the legal system had its claws in them. Calloway's name was in the headlines. Darius's bank accounts were frozen. Their empire was starting to crumble. The power had shifted. I should have felt relief, but I knew one thing for certain. They wouldn't go down without a fight. And I had just declared war. And just like that, everything changed. The courtroom was packed. I sat beside Rachel, gripping the stack of documents that had the power to end this nightmare. My breath was steady, my pulse slow, but inside, I could feel the storm. Across the room, Darius sat at the defendant's table, his face carefully blank, but I saw the tightness in his jaw, the way his fingers curled into fists on the table. Beside him, his lawyers were whispering among themselves, stealing glances at me and Rachel. They knew they were losing. The judge entered, a gavel struck, and the room settled into tense silence. It was time. Rachel stood first. Your Honor, this case is no longer just about a custody dispute. It is about fraud, financial crimes, and an orchestrated campaign to erase my client's rights and existence. Her voice rang through the courtroom, unwavering, clear. One by one, she laid out the evidence: the forged affidavit, the fraudulent bank accounts, the financial trail leading back to Jonathan Calloway. Gasps rippled through the room when Rachel placed the contract, the one that proved Darius had been paid to ensure my silence, onto the table before the judge. I turned to look at my father then. His face was pale, but he clenched his jaw, refusing to show weakness. But I knew. I had him. And then, the moment everything truly collapsed, Rachel lifted the final piece of evidence. "Your Honor, this document proves that Jonathan Calloway financed my client's father's legal battle, not to protect family, but to protect his own financial interests." The judge's eyes narrowed. The room shifted. The case was no longer just about me. This was bigger. A criminal investigation into both of them was now inevitable. Across the room, Darius leaned toward his lawyers, hissing something under his breath. And then, his legal team suddenly withdrew. A ripple of shock swept through the courtroom. Rachel smirked, leaning toward me. "They just realized they can't win." The judge turned back to us, her voice firm. "The custody claim is dismissed. The fraudulent financial activities will be referred for criminal prosecution. The court finds sufficient evidence to pursue further investigation into the defendant's involvement with fraudulent business dealings." And just like that, it was over. I exhaled. The weight that had crushed me for years finally lifted. I turned to Selene, sitting in the row behind me. She was staring at me, wide-eyed. "You're free," I whispered, and for the first time in her life, I think she believed it. Outside, the air was crisp, the autumn wind carrying the weight of the past away. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, voices shouting. "Zara, what happens next? Do you have a statement?" I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Orion clapped a hand on my shoulder, his grin wide. "You did it!" I let out a breath, shaking my head. "We did it!" Selene slipped her hand into mine. We walked down the courthouse steps together. As we reached the sidewalk, I glanced back one last time, just long enough to see the officers leading Darius away in handcuffs. Calloway's fate was still uncertain. His empire was crumbling, but men like him never went down easy. I knew I might have to fight again. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I turned forward, the city stretching before me. My future was finally mine. And I walked away, without looking back. For years, I let them define me. I let them take from me my time, my money, my dignity. But the moment I took back control, everything changed. I fought for my truth. I fought for my freedom. And I won. Because no one, not family, not power, not money, gets to decide my worth but me. If my story proves anything, it's this: you are stronger than the ones who try to break you. So stand up, speak out, and never let them silence you. If this message resonates with you, make sure to subscribe, because your story, your voice, matters.